a brief discussion about those sorts of things, and we have wide representation at the Festival of Cultures anyway. The city planner came and talked about the Aokautere Urban Growth Plan. We put a submission through. We also looked at medium density housing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but obviously from my background, you understand that we have experience in that. So I'll talk about that shortly. Courtney presented to you before on the Adderstone Reserve submission. That was something that was interesting for us, not knowing that being one of our first submissions. We met with the Community Development Advisor, library staff and youth space coordinators around safe communities, and that's something which is really important for us, for our youth of today, and particularly myself as an assistant principal, seeing some of our youth not in schools. And lastly, at the end of the year, beginning of this year, we put through our submission for the long-term plan, which is really the nuts and bolts of what I'm going to talk about today. Are there any questions as I move forward?
We'll do questions at the end, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All right. We farewelled Councillor Renee Dingwall and thanked her for establishing this particular group. It's important for us that we have a voice for Pacifica people, and we were very thankful for her, and also welcomed Katie Zabelin for taking on the job as the council representative. All right, our plan. We currently are contributing to discussions around city and around the various priorities. For us being a new group, I guess the key thing for us is at what point and at what times are we able to come and talk to you around these sorts of things, apart from when there are submissions of proposals and those sorts of things. Pacifica people are notoriously quiet at points, so establishing ourselves as a voice for our group is something that we're going to have to work at and I guess get the voice back from our people. And it's probably something that you're fully aware of in terms of voting and those sorts of things, just getting out and amongst our people. So having a representative such as ourselves to talk to you is vitally important. We're also looking at how we can get the council, or supportive council, to build leadership amongst our younger group in terms of governance capacity, and to help our Pacifica providers. It's quite important that it's Pacifica looking after Pacifica. When you walk around Te Marae o Hine, for Pacifica people, there's nothing to tell them that there's Pacifica people in town. There's lots of cultures, don't get me wrong, there's lots of cultures in Palmerston North, but one of the things we'd like to see is some sort of promotion, whether it be artwork, pieces of Pacific art, hence why I put some artwork out there. I'm not asking the council to buy it, by the way. But seeing ourselves in Palmerston North, I think that's important for Pacifica to feel a sense of belonging. We do have various initiatives taking place, one being the PPC, Papaioe Pacifica Community Trust, and that is Pacifica looking after Pacifica. We do have a building at Bill Brown Park, which is working okay. But what I'd like the council to think about is having more of a centralised building. And tied up with, I guess, with housing and medium density housing is where these places are located. Pacifica have aspirations of living wherever they would like, and unfortunately, a lot of the housing options are in areas which they'd like to be away from, but that's the only option. I could take questions on that later. Pacifica Hub is something that's important to people as well. In our submission, in the 10-year plan, we talked about having a whare whono but a whalefauna is a round, this is square, but a whalefauna was a round oval, and that means that everybody has the same opportunity to speak, and you're treated the same. And I think if we have something along those lines, we'd get more opportunity for Pacifica to contribute back, other than just us, because we are entrusted with a whole lot of mana, I suppose, and a whole lot of responsibility, but we might not represent accurately the rest of our community because people don't talk. We feel that this type of opportunity to have a hub will bring out more people, more contributions to things. I've spoken about medium density housing. Pacifica families are huge. My mum was one of 9. And often looking at where Pacifica live, they like to have their whole families together. I know that it was just us living in Palmerston North. My family ended up all moving to Palmerston North. My grandparents never went back home to Samoa. They're buried at James Line with the rest of my family. So it's about that family nucleus together. If we are building houses that don't accommodate for those large families, then we're going to create crowded home situations, which is, I think, not particularly healthy for our Pacifica people. Albeit they'd be beautiful houses, 2 bedrooms is not going to cut it. Yeah. And lastly, I was just thinking about youth representation and having more. We've got some less grey-haired people here, which is great. For us as Pacifica, we'd like to have some on board and listen to the vibrant ideas that some of our Pacifica people have. I went through that pretty quickly. I haven't stunned anybody there. I can go back.
Can I say something?
Yep.
Sorry. Hi, Madam Chair, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. It's lovely to be back before you today. Just following on from our awesome Chair, AJ, who has put together some great sentiments from our group this year. It's really awesome to be in front of you representing Pacifica Reference Group and our plan for 2023. We think that it's great to have a seat at the table where we no longer actually have a seat at the table. So thanks for having us here today. Just off the back of some of the things that AJ has said today, I just want to plant a seed with some of you. At our last submission for Addiston, we talked about housing and being in an area that would work for Pacifica. And so I just want to remind you that currently most Pacifica are in the 4412. Bill Brown, or our current Pacifica space, is in the 4412. What I want to challenge you with this year is that as part of our 2023 plan, we'd love to see Pacifica representation, not just in this space, but in the inner cities. So where and how can we make that happen this year? Some place for our youth to feel safe. It will help you with some of the things you're trying to do within your youth spaces to create less conflict in the community and to create that safer community, but also around that medium density housing. How can we partner with council this year with some of the organisations that you guys know have been stood up in the last year off the back of COVID that could build some of this medium density housing alongside private developers who are willing to partner directly with Pacifica for the goals of creating safer and larger homes that maybe council can't help us with, but potentially you could help us with land. So just some ideas to leave you with before you ask us some really good questions, I hope. But yeah, just a seed to plant with you from the perspective of our group that we're really asking for some really great support this year, and we do want to be at this table a little bit more to do that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Courtney and AJ. Councillors, any partai for the Pacifica Reference Group? Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Courtney. Thanks, AJ, for coming along. Really appreciated your presentation. And AJ, thank you for explaining that background for us as to what brings you here to us today. I had a couple of questions. First, AJ, you mentioned the importance of services for Pacifica being by Pacifica. But you also talked about looking for opportunities to step into governance and into youth representation. So are you talking there about in the Pacifica space, or are you looking at broader than that? Yeah,
I guess every opportunity to increase the understanding of Pacifica in governance space. As an aside, I worked at university for 9 years. I taught governance and succession planning, amongst other things that I did. And I feel that for our Pacifica community to step up and have the opportunity to step up, we need to provide them with opportunities to step up. And if the council is able to support that, along with us, we'd get more buy-in, and get the traction to provide these opportunities which currently aren't being provided or in very limited supply. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to pick up on the comment you made about housing and Pacifica people having aspirations to live where they want to live, and maybe that linked to what Courtney said about Pacifica being focused in the 4412. I'm just picking up what you're putting down there, AJ. What do you want to tell us?
I don't know whether I'd probably be more democratic. I think it's probably better coming bluntly from Courtney.
Go for it, Courtney.
I think in my original sentiment, we know we've got a lot of Pacifica in the 4412. The 4412 is great. We have a lot of social organisations in that space working with our people. But alongside that, and if I can just use Soho as an example, the medium density housing on Pioneer Highway, I have personal experience with that area because I live in that area. We have police there every day. I'm not sure if any of you realise that or know that, but we have cops in our area every day. I've got 4 young children that I'm trying to bring up in that area to create a safe and free community for them to feel like they can walk out on the street or walk to and from potentially the warehouse, which is literally around the corner from us. When I have police sirens going every day, it is not sustainable to the community that we're trying to create. And so I think that what we're looking for is potentially spreading our community out a little bit more so that they can see success in other areas of the city. Currently, honestly, it's so expensive to buy a house, we all know that, and that's not something we can all change overnight. But what we can do is potentially unlock areas that allow our people to see themselves in that area. So potentially by freeing up land that we know we could make more affordable for our people to build on, that allows our people to see success for themselves in a different area that they don't currently. Putting our people in social housing is not working. And that's what we're doing at the moment as a community. We're allowing that to happen. We're allowing our people to be next door to other people who aren't lifting them up. And social organisations, they're overwhelmed, they're struggling. We're not putting enough money into social organisations currently. And I think going back to what Andrew was saying before, a lot of our Pacifica groups are new. They've been created in the last couple of years. Governance is new to a lot of our people. So they're also learning on the go. You guys have a lot of experience here around the table to lift that level of standard up in that space. And so how can we create that space where our community feels that they can come to you for governance support so that they can then lead their communities? But also in that housing space, how do we look at the areas that they're in currently? And I mean, I'm not trying to say that the 4412 is a horrible place. I don't think that at all. I live there, love the 4412. But I'm just saying this space is overwhelmed, and having that many social organisations is not conducive to the success of the long-term plan of our city.
Thank you, Courtney.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Andrew and Courtney. And Courtney, thank you very much for that clarification around, the spaces in which you would like to live. I've only really got one question, just really around sort of youth development and youth safety, which you've already touched on. Do you feel sufficiently connected to PNCC and other organisations in terms of making good from that? What are the gaps and opportunities that you see in that area?
I feel like since Pacifica Reference Group has started, we've had a really great opportunity to connect with some of the local city council members who are working in that space at an operational level. So people like Anu, who are currently working in that space and knows what's happening, that's really great. Do I feel like there's enough support in that space? Probably not. Do I feel like we could do better? Yes. How do we do that? I don't know, probably more consultation. We have meetings once a month if you'd like to come. And we directly connect with our youth through people like PPCT, so Papaioa Pacifica Community Trust. We have them doing like homework programs once a fortnight. However, homework programs cost money, and resource to find our people cost money. A lot of our Pacifica people do work voluntarily and free because they want to see success in their young people. So maybe considering, and I mean, obviously we're talking to our community groups about how they can tap into funding and how they can unlock that opportunity. But again, that stems back to that governance space, and funding is really something that you need to be in the know of to be able to continue to sustain. And funding's also not long-term, it's 1 year, 2 years. So yeah, things like that I think would really help in the educational piece. But yeah, I think since we started Pacifica Reference Group, there has been some really good learnings from us to the community and to PNCC.
Thanks, Courtney. That's very helpful, Madam Chair.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Andrew and Courtney. The PPCT came and saw me a while ago, and actually all the things that you spoke about, they spoke about as well. So it's, obviously that's aligned. When they spoke about the Whale Whānau, they felt they had a real connection to Bill Brown. Is that your view as well?
Bill Brown Park has been a godsend in some ways, yep. In that it is in the heart of the 441 For Pacifica to aspire to be something else, perhaps it needs to be somewhere else. It's functioning, yeah, and it's really nice that the kitchen and things have been upgraded. But for a functioning place for Pacifica in a true sense, it's not quite there.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, I'll rephrase my question.
Sure.
If it was to be something new, they said to me they felt it could be on that park, perhaps not in that space where it currently is, but in a greenfields part of the park.
Yep. I guess, yeah, if that was an opportunity, if that was possible, yeah, definitely. But again, I think there is an underlying aspiration for Pacifica people to see other places and not be confined to the 441 too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask you guys a question around Pacifica youth representation and get a feel for what you're asking us today is for us to take up the challenge as the PNCC of engaging and bringing you guys along with us, or if you're looking up at taking that challenge up and us coming and supporting you. Who do you want to lead something like that?
I think it's a partnership. Yep, always. And I think, again, Pacifica need to see Pacifica faces for it to have credibility, but alongside that, with the backing of the council, they'll see that there is something going to happen. So, yeah, together.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you both. I'm just coming back to the aspiration that you've expressed about wanting to see Pacifica living across the city. What do you see as the main barrier to that happening right now?
Truthfully, developers. Besides developers, I mean, obviously it's a financial thing, but there's no properties. I'll put my hand up, I live in Hokowhitu, okay? But there are no properties in the area for our Pacifica people to afford or even consider because it's so far out of their range. I'm not asking the council to give money, but maybe find opportunities where there's land in some of those areas that could have a caveat in that they don't put the price up so high that they're just unattainable. Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tēnā kōrua talofa lava. Thank you for presenting today. Just a couple of quick questions. Later on this afternoon, we're receiving a paper that's going to look at some housing insecurity issues across the city, and New Waka Trust has been contributing to that. You guys have a synergy with New Waka Trust, so they'll be representing Pacifica Reference Group, whakaaro and thoughts as well. Yeah, awesome. There was one other, just a second. Yeah, I take your point, Courtney, about the troubles that happening down at Pioneer Highway at the Soho. It's an example of, yes, those families did need a roof over their heads, but there was no backup support to support them with their expansive needs, which is also highlighted in this afternoon's report. So thank you for coming.
Just wanted to touch on your first point if I could. Sorry, I know it wasn't a question. Sorry, Madam Chair. We also have another organisation that's been stood up in October called Po Ono Trust. They are focused primarily on housing. So I have worked for New Waka Trust and am well aware of the work that they're doing and the great work that they've done as part of the founding team. I think that they are doing great work. They're also quite a social organisation. So we've got 2 organisations now who have housing focuses, which I think one identifies the need for housing and really appreciate the work that Te Tihi has done in that space on housing and security. But yeah, I think Po Ono Trust focuses mainly on housing. That is their only focus, and we really do need niche organisations at this point to focus on some of those niche things, especially at the ground roots level. So love both of those sentiments, and we have now 3 really great Pacifica organisations in our town doing really awesome things. So we're quite across all of those organisations. As part of Pacifica Reference Group, an important part is making sure we also represent and hear from those community organisations. So yeah, definitely listening to what they have to say and definitely trying to represent them all at this table today as well. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another great presentation, thank you. I was wondering if the Pacifica Reference Group has been in contact with the Flaxmere community. The Methodist Church, in conjunction with the Samoan community in Flaxmere, is building 12 new houses with $7 million project. And I was wondering if you'd been able to visit them and have a talk with them at all.
I personally haven't, but I do have a connection there. I was just over there recently doing some of the cyclone relief work. But yes, actually, great example. We aren't currently connected with them or have heard anything from them, but good idea. We should definitely connect. We're all about collaboration. I think at the end of the day, when you work together, you can achieve more.
Totally.
So yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you.
Our last question, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Courtney. Good to see you both. Now that you're up and running, really interested to hear your, I guess, reflections on kind of the extent of connectivity that you have with Pacifica communities in the city in terms of current state and kind of future state where you might want to be, and what kind of the in-between bit might look like, and ultimately whether there's a role for council in supporting that.
Well, thank you. There have been things that have been running a long time for Pacifica. For instance, the Study Support Centre. We started that in 1999 when Trevor Mallard was Minister of Education. That has continued in our area, particularly with student achievement, where we sort of punch above our weight. We're ahead of most of the other major centres, so rather than a remedial study support, it was more extension. So that's been going. From that, we created a holiday program which eventuated into Pacifica Fusion, which is running up to its 20th year, which is not a polyfest. It's more than a polyfest, because we deal with academia and a whole lot of other things in there. There are a whole core of people that have been the same, we're involved in the same sorts of things. So the strength of our group is the fact that we've been around a while and younger ones are coming through. And these key things are, I guess, our foundation of coming through. Now the Pacifica Reference Group is up and running. I think we're now trying to scope out how we can influence others, get more people involved, and then see how the council we can work in a synergy, because it's early days for us. We're not sure how far we can push. I say that with a smile. And how you can help us, because we're still trying to get into certain areas of our community because they haven't had us before. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess just looking at your work program then for the kind of next 12 months, do you kind of see that coming to an advanced state within the next 12 months in terms of that needs assessment and where things might go from your perspective?
Again, it's about understanding the lay of the land and knowing what are council priorities as well, where we can fit in. I think the key one for us at the moment is just establishing ourselves and seeing, particularly with housing, how we can make some sort of difference to our communities, because they're relying on us to be the voice.
I'd also just like to say, I think that a key state, ideal world would be that in 3 years' time we didn't have a Pacifica reference group, and that might sound very controversial. However, there's only a Pacifica reference group because we need to be heard. If everybody was, and please forgive me for being frank, but culturally competent to understand Pacifica and how we operate and the way that our culture leads us to be, then we wouldn't actually need to be sitting here today. And so I think a lot of these things could be achieved in 3 years if we had your support. And I know that a lot of you think of us at many tables, but it's not just thinking of us, it's thinking like us. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you both, Madam Chair.
Right, that brings us to the end of questions. So thank you very much, AJ and Courtney, for your presentation and for being able to answer a myriad of questions from councillors. And I think the level of interest should be quite encouraging to you. So thank you very much for your mahi. Thank you. So councillors, I will move that we, you may, yeah, you can sit up. I'll move that we resolve that the presentation be received for information, seconded by Councillor Hancock, and I'll open it up if anyone would like to make a brief comment. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just want to acknowledge the reference group. It's great to hear the aspirations. And as I said, I'd heard from one of their feeder groups, the Papiaoia Pacifica Trust, and they're well known to us. But it's interesting, having been around this table 8.5 or 10 years actually, but 8.5 as the Mayor, we'd hear from Pacifica Fusion at different times, sometimes in a distressed state when officers and governance weren't aligned. We all thought it was going great, but somehow funding hadn't been included. So it's great to see that we're talking about more than just an event. And if I could just acknowledge the aspirations that they're signalling, and Amanaki STEM Academy wasn't mentioned, but that does need to be mentioned, I think. I went to their graduation probably about 6 years ago, and there was 10 students. There's now 110. AJ or Andrew touched on it about that they're achieving, in fact, it's acceleration. Of our 9 high schools, 5 Pacifica students were either head boy, head girl or ducks. Now that speaks volumes, and that's the future. So quite humbling, really. So I think keep up the lobbying and the aspiration that you're seeking, and the whale whānau could happen. It took Hamilton 30 years. It might be able to take Palmy a few years. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just briefly, thanks Courtney and Andrew. I'd also like to echo some of those words. It'd also be good to see you put some of these things into a submission to the annual plan, because nothing beats putting some of these things in, because that's where the rubber hits the road when we see it in the annual plan. So thank you very much for putting this forward, but it's also good to see it in the annual plan as well. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. Thank you. Ngā mihi ki Andrew, kōrua ko Courtney, koutou ko te ohu. Nei rā te mihi matakui ki a koutou. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's lovely to see both of you. Andrew, we go back many, many years in education, and I acknowledge your fantastic work in that sector. I'd like to say that in my 42 years of being in education, I've seen the demographic change quite considerably, and I can say that it's growing in terms of our young Pacifica students and people, and that's wonderful to see. Another thing I thought was really good to say, and Courtney, was about the larger homes, because 2 bedrooms don't do it. As a Māori in our household, we had 3 generations living there, 8 or 9, but Dad was one of 14 and Mum was one of 9, like your mother. So that was a really valid point that I haven't heard before around the table, and I think that's good for us to be mindful of that if we want to keep families together and we want to ensure that that support system is in there. Wholeheartedly agree and support that, like I do with the whale as well. And one of the councillors, I think it was Councillor Arnott, had raised a very good thought that there are some wonderful things happening around the country, and you know, I just sort of think that would be good too. And I've asked both Councillor Wood and myself have asked Councillor Zabin if she can let us know when your next hui is, because we will go. Thank you. Kia ora.
I'll just finish off with a comment from me. Just thank you so much for the work that you're doing, you know, considering the very short amount of time that your group has been up and running. I think it's fantastic to be able to get a report back like this. You've highlighted a number of issues that really haven't been canvassed around the table before, and I think it's fantastic that you're challenging us on how we can do better for the Pacifica community. So thank you very much. We look forward to further work in this space. Thank you. Right, councillors, we will vote on hands to receive the presentation. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we will just take a step back now to item 5, which is the presentation about the Little Stars programme. And we've got Jane Carrigan, Independent Disability Advocate, and Pip Cook, co-founder of the Planet Ryan Family Foundation, who are going to come and speak to us. So, no mai, haere mai. Jane, is Pip coming, or?
Yes, unfortunately, I've lost my exhibit A and my exhibit B. She may come back.
Okay, that's fine.
But I will reference them.
Are you familiar with the traffic light system? So there'll be a little traffic light there. So when it's on green, you're good for talking for about 7 minutes. Orange is 2 minutes, and then red is your last minute.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Given that it's going green, I'll get started. Kia ora, and thank you to Council for having us here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and that's all we are going to do today. The 10 minutes is 10 minutes, and in that respect, there's an awful lot to say, and going through a PowerPoint seems to sort of not adequately articulate it. Palmerston North is a growing city, and just by way of a statistic, particularly in the area of disability, the Mana Whakaha program, which is a program that was rolled out about 3 years ago and is still in its pilot stage, has attracted over 1,000 people to the city just because of that funding model. And that funding model is, I can tell you right now, much more generous than it is in any other part of the country. So it's completely understandable why people would come here, even just for the funding model. Having said that, there are lots of other attractions, primarily as someone from Auckland, it's nice and flat down here. So, the reality is Mana Whakaha provides a great funding package for people and excellent supports that normally you wouldn't have. But you can give people all the funded support under the sun, but it means nothing if there aren't services for people to access, and that is where the Little Stars Centre comes in. We have discussed it with yourself, Madam Chair, and with Karen, and the Little Stars Centre is the brainchild of my colleague here, Pip Cook, who has set up with her husband the Planet Ryan Family Foundation. Mr. Ryan sitting here, by the way. The Planet Ryan part's a story in itself. In any event, under Planet Ryan, we want to have what we call the Little Stars Centre, which we would like to see established in Palmerston North Centre itself. We are establishing a centre out in the Woodville area. On the Cooks have gifted a section of their farm to setting up a day program. And a respite area, both very desperately needed services in the area of disability, particularly for young people with intellectual disability. But our muse, if you will, for the Little Stars Centre is young Julia sitting over there. Julia was born at 26 weeks. Her twin died at birth 2 days after they were born, and as a result of profound brain injury, Julia spent her first 4 months in hospital, but Julia, in the scheme of things, has been extraordinarily lucky because we've been able to get her a funded program and find somebody who could provide the services that has Julia sitting there peering at books, ripping apart pages, all the sorts of things we were told when she was born she would never be able to do. So no one ever gets too wild at Julia for doing anything because it is extraordinary that in 2.5 years that she can be sitting here as she is today, like most little toddlers, though still needing a lot of work. And a lot of work has gone into Julia. And that's what we want to see for other families, because we talk about funding in terms of individualised funding and everyone having their own program, but it's extraordinarily isolating for families with intellectually disabled young children. When Ryan leaves school at 21, he's 18 now, there is nothing for him. And that is why we've set up the Planet Ryan Family Foundation. The Little Stars Centre is something we want to have in town because we're very mindful that there are young families with young children, and unfortunately we just do not have the health system to cater for their needs. So their needs are an entirely integrated program. It's not a once-a-month visit to the physio at the hospital. That will get them nowhere fast. And so we are really motivated, in part because of Julia, but also as part of our own research into setting up Planet Ryan, the understanding the desperate need in the community and the difference it can make. Ryan is an excellent example. He had no access to supports. He now sits in a wheelchair. He cannot walk. He will never walk. He walked as a child and he had ad hoc supports. Ryan comes out of the foster care system. They had ad hoc supports, but never the sort of support that you need if you're actually going to make a tangible difference to a young person's life. So Ryan himself, while he is now getting supports he never has before, the simple fact is we've missed the boat, bluntly, with Ryan, and we don't want to miss the boat with the next generation of children. So the Little Stars Centre, we have an excellent person, an integrated occupational therapist. She set up a program in the UK called the PACE Centre, and it is now has a leading reputation in the United Kingdom as a school for young children, preschoolers through to the schooling level, in terms of the program that they run. We would be looking to be, if not partnering with them, certainly benefiting from their expertise. So we're hugely lucky to have the OT who set that up, has shifted to Palmerston North, as luck would have it, and hence why we've got Julia over there throwing things right, left and centre. So, as I say, it might not appear a blessing, but the difference it has made to Julia, I have a little chap up in Auckland I help, exactly the same birthing circumstances, again, a twin died at birth, and I've only just got him onto ACC, and he is It's heartbreaking that the first 4 years of his life he has not had the support that's needed. It just is not there. It's extraordinary. Once upon a time it was. We had a hospital system where if you were born with cerebral palsy, you would go in for 3 months, you'd be doing an intensive program. We no longer have that. And part of that is unfortunately, is the fallout from the individualising of disability care and support. The reality is that providing a service like the Little Stars Centre is essential on a whole range of levels. It's essential for families. Families, it's not just the child who's isolated. Families are particularly isolated, and it's very isolating having a child. If your closest contacts are via a Facebook page, we want to provide something for people so that they can attend, they can visit, they can leave their child there, they can know that their child is having individual therapy at the same time as having group therapy, having parents work with their child at the time that they're undertaking the therapy. The bonuses are extraordinary. If we can free up families, you've got 20 families, family carers who could be working in the community. Palmerston North is a growing city. It has a reputation now because of its funding regime with disability and disability supports. We would like to see that that reputation grow, and what we are looking for from council is nothing more than support at this point. We are currently seeking grants, and but you know, by hook or by crook, we're going to get it working. We don't care how we do it; we will get it working. But we would like to know that we have the partnership with council in terms of your support, the mahi you might be doing with Mana Whakaha via your disability community group, because it all comes back to community. And for these families, for these young people to be connected to their community, they have to be seen in their community, and that we just don't. I was talking to people yesterday who was marvelling that they just do not see disabled people out in the community. Now that's up in Auckland and a slightly different scenario, but the reality is seeing the Julias and the Ryans out in the community is really something we don't see, but we would see if we had ourselves a designated program, a designated building. I'm very mindful my predecessors are also looking for a building, but you know, the reality is why we're here today without a PowerPoint. I'm sorry, I seriously underestimated the audience numbers, but we do have some booklets, a couple of booklets here that I will leave both on Planet Ryan and on the Little Stars Centre, which is the program that we are talking to Palmerston North Council about today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Jane and Pip and Ryan and Julia. That's awesome. We've got some questions from councillors. So Councillor Bowen, you're first in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and I look forward to seeing the pack, which might answer the question itself. I suppose the model I'm most familiar with is our Creative Journeys model here in town, which is a business model. I wondered, that's probably where most councillors are familiar. Could you explain to us how what you're proposing is different to that kind of model?
Well, I'm sorry, I can't claim to know that particular model terribly well. But I mean, what is different is that there are not funded support services like this. People are given the funding and told, you now, great, you can go off and get the supports, but there just are not the supports out there, which is why we are very grassroots on the Little Stars Centre. The reality is what we want for our children is not out there. We want it, and we know there are an awful lot of other parents out there who want it. So in terms of, I mean, we would always work with anything that was similar, and, you know, it just makes sense. But in terms of knowing what is out there, this is part of the problem. People just do not understand and don't know.
And could that be part of the support that council could offer to make that connection for you?
Martin here will also tell you we're looking for car parking spots to be turned into perhaps wheelchair access parking. But at a practical level, absolutely, that is the sort of thing that talking with you people would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to ask a question about the space that you would need. Does it need to be purpose-built for an organisation like yours, or can you retrofit existing space?
Well, we're looking, because we will be coming into Palmerston, we're looking at retrofitting, basically. And look, it sounds complicated, but it's not. We've looked at a couple of spaces, both which have been ideal in their own individual way, one right here in town and one a little further out of town, but next to a gym. We have builders as dads, so we've got the access to people to establish, to create it how we want to have it created. And there are equipment. Some equipment can be very expensive, but equally there's a lot of funding out there. So it's a case of once we get ourselves bedded down, we're confident that what we will have here will be fine. We are purpose building out at Woodville for the major centre. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you very much. And just a second question, if I may. I was very thankful to have met Maxine when she was setting up Mana Whaikaha. In your opinion, sort of living and breathing the sector, if it was picked up by the government and spread across the country rather than just as a pilot here, do you see many of the families that have moved here moving back to where they originated, or do you think we'll continue to be a hub for
I think you'll
disability
continue to
care?
be a hub, would be my personal view, simply because while there's a lot of chat about the big picture, it will be very expensive if they roll it out throughout the country the way they've rolled it out here. So I don't want to sound cynical, but I kind of have about 40 years of cynicism behind me. So I do not. I think people will play it safe. And the reality is, once people get to a place and settle in, they might have come for the money. But why would you want to leave here and head back to Auckland or something like that? It just doesn't make sense. So, my guess is most people will stay.
Completely agreed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
What a great comment.
Well, don't tell Mayor Brown. That'd be right, yeah. You forgot to mention that part.
Right, Councillor Finlay, you had a question.
Thank you. You mentioned about the amount of people with disabilities that come to Palmerston North, and it's been like that for many years. Over the years, I've seen so many organisations that have grown up in the disability sector that have, we had the Audrey Green Disability Information Centre, which I work for. We had the Disinformation newspaper. IHC had the daycare centre, but they don't last.
No. That will be largely government funding.
Yeah, but it's also that, do you think it could be because the parents, as their children grow, the parents leave, and there's quite often leaves a gap that no one comes into. So it's the continuing. I've seen it time again.
That's interesting, Councillor. To be honest, I couldn't really comment on that. I just don't know the demographic well enough. But people tend to leave if there's not something there holding them. And for instance, the IHC daycare program, that is my background. So all of those day programs have closed. So they no longer work with children under 6. The changes have been profound at the coalface for families. So I do not talk glibly about we have a lost generation of families, because for the last 30 years, when the original transformational changes happened to disability, we have seen a hands-off approach from the Crown and putting the onus back on families. And I'll be blunt, I quite often use the word exploitation when I talk about that. Once upon a time, we recognised people's very high needs and the very high level of supports they required. We had hospitals, we had trained professionals, we had psychopaedics, we had psychopaedic nurses, we had psychiatric nurses. We don't have any of that anymore. And do people actually leave, or do they just stop using services because they don't feel like they're getting the services. Because again, I'm not being glib when I talk about isolation. We talk about individualised funding, but I talk about isolation funding because you can have all the funding under the sun, but if there's nothing out there to use that funding on, then your capacity to provide a person an opportunity of a good life is greatly eroded. So
It's actually something that's frustrated me for years.
yes, I can imagine it would have. If you sound very involved, and it would be disheartening. Yeah.
For example, if you go to the 90s, DPA and how strong they were.
Yeah.
And now no one even knows it exists anymore.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt. Excuse me, councillor. Do you have another question there?
I'm asking a question about the DPA. Do you have it?
I'm not. The DPA is the Disabled People's Assembly for those people who are unaware. But I don't personally have a lot to do with them. I know they're a lobby group. And I'm not sure I'm their most favourite person because I do talk about isolation and not the individualising. So we have our differences. I think it would probably safely sum that up. And I work largely with families, and they are very orientated to a disabled membership rather than whānau. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that brings us to the end of questions. So thank you very much, Jane, Pip, Ryan and Julia.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
And thank
everybody.
you for, I believe you came down from Auckland today to present to us, so thank you.
Well, I'll be down for a while, so yeah, but it was a bit of a rush.
Thank you very much.
I don't recommend the road between State Highway 1 and Fielding. It took me longer to get there than it took me to get down to State Highway 1 Fielding exit. So. Okay, thank you very much. I'll leave those and... yeah, thanks, mate.
Thank you. So, councillors, I will move that we resolve that the presentation be received for information. Seconded, Councillor Hancock, and I'll open it up if there are any comments. Councillor Finlay.
It's an amazing thing about Palmerston North. The amount of people who move to Palmerston North because it has been known as being the most disability-friendly city in the country. Back in the 90s, I came to Palmerston North because of my disability at the stage. This town has attracted people with disabilities for years, and there has been so many different organisations that have started, that have got going, that have been promising, but because of lack of funding and lack of support, they have fallen away. I could probably name 20 of them for you right now, but I won't. But the disability sector in this town is huge. It's absolutely massive. And until we as a council and the community start to realise it and support it and get behind it, nothing's going to change. We've got an organisation that's come here with some absolutely brilliant vision. And unless we get some support from that vision, it'll die. And I know that sounds horrible, but I've seen it so many times. We have got to not just talk about supporting people with disabilities. We've got to actually start supporting them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bowen, are you in the queue? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was hesitating on that because I maybe take a slightly different view than Councillor Finlay to say that I feel... Well, first, I'm going to say I love that quote, come for the money, stay for the lifestyle. Let's just quickly take that one on board as our own. But I think one of the things that Council can and does do in support of children and people with disabilities is provide that connection and awareness of the range of services that we do have here. One thing Councillor Finlay and I do agree on is the huge amount of support services. Yes, some have come and gone over the years, but in general, the huge amount of support that's available through agencies in our city, and I think that is somewhere where we can meaningfully support a new opportunity is to connect with existing opportunities in the city, as well as the practical considerations that the group were looking for in terms of council support, where I'm sure our staff can help to orientate them to that. So I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It's always heartbreaking and challenging to hear about those individual circumstances and to see the embodiment of that brought into the chamber really does bring home the important work that our support enables in our city, and I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just to note that when Councillor Johnston and I met with with Jane and Pip, we also did put the suggestion out that they would be welcome to come and present at the Disability Reference Group, where that would be perhaps a really valuable place also to share ideas, and I'm sure that, some of that group would also have ideas to offer them about perhaps next steps as well. So I just thought I'd mention that today as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there no further comment? Okay, then we will vote to receive the presentation of information. We'll vote on the hands. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Okay, that brings us to item 7, which is a presentation from the Seniors Reference Group. And I'd like to invite Jim Jeffries, Chair of the Seniors Reference Group, and no stranger to the chamber, to come and present. Do you have other people who are presenting with you, Jim, or is it just you've got a support team in the gallery?
Our council representative there, Martin, might like to join us just in case. My memory's getting fades a little at times, so he'll be a good backup to reinforce anything that I forget.
Very good. Well, we look forward to hearing from you.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, and also to Mayor and councillors. Yes, it's familiar looking in, because 10 years before I spent 21 years inside, I spent a lot of time doing this. But this is my first time since, so anyway, I thought today we have a presentation which you see on the screen, but I understand that has been circulated. So I thought it would be a good idea to start off by just understanding why we exist as a group. And I think that's a good reminder to us and also to council who set us up. But first of all, we have a few representatives from our committee here, and I'd like to ask them to stand up, identify themselves. Well,
Yeah, so just, sorry, for those who are listening online, they won't be able to hear you because you're not speaking to a microphone.
But if you all just stand up anyway, the group here will recognise you in the future. But you can be excused, Councillor Finlay, as the council representative on our group soon. Okay, so we've got a good representation here. I guess the first thing that I'd like to comment on really is the significance of the over 60s to the total population of the group and of Palmerston North. Presently, the over 60s represent about 20% of the city's population. And if you look at the way in which the demographic is changing over time, it is likely that proportion will increase significantly. Perhaps over the next decade or so. And the demographic that exists now and the trend that we will see for sure has wide-ranging implications. There are I guess 5 areas I can identify that those implications will be in, and I'll identify the 5, and then I'll just take a moment to talk a little bit more about one of them, which I think will be significant. You've talked about housing, health, employment, financial and social issues. They are all going to be important to that particular part of our population. The one I want to just delve down into a little bit of depth is social opportunities for over 60s. I had an example that I observed just recently as official photographer for the Palmerston North Flora Art Club. I get to see them all get together on a regular basis, and 2 things came to me from that is one is the providing of social group opportunities for this demographic in the city, and secondly, the importance. In this case, it's the community centre up in Ferguson Street, but the importance of having community centres within the city that people of this age group in particular, but other age groups and different types of organisation can actually find a home, I guess. And that the Ferguson Street one is a really good example, and I think that when you start to look at your future planning for those, that as the city grows, we need to make sure that we have those community centres in the appropriate places. The other thing that that was notable is when I look in the room of the Flora Art Club, it's 100% female. And I think that's something that gets under the counter and is not recognised is the different male versus female social needs. Females are socially proactive. I look at my wife and she is a member of about 5 different organisations, and males are generally not. And I have a lunch with a couple of my mates, and they're prime examples. They do nothing else outside the lunches we have occasionally. And I think they represent a large amount of the population. The fact that males do not seek out actively the social opportunities is something that needs to be borne in mind when we look at the social needs of the city. And even the seniors reference group, and here this is not a gender equality issue, but it's actually quite representative of the fact that males don't get involved. And our group is 10 females and 4 males. And you start to see out there that there is a big gap in in providing social opportunities for males. Okay. There is in front of you, let's just have a look at some of the things that have happened to us. Most of them are pretty straightforward, and they represent a 1 year of learning for us after we've been going, I suppose, almost a year. We have a chair, and that's me. And I probably should have introduced myself, to people in the audience. But I kind of feel comfortable with this group because I know pretty much all of you. And Marianne Tremaine is the vice chair or the deputy chair. Okay. Here are some of the issues that we did actually get to look at during the year, and perhaps I'm going to comment on one in particular, and that's the one that's third from the left on the top there, and it's something that was discussed quite a bit by us as a group, and we have already made certainly written a letter to council on this. It's the recommendation that Palmerston North gain accreditation as an age-friendly city and become a member of the age-friendly global network. So we hope that, certainly when we look at the annual plan, I'm sure we'll repeat that. But that was something that the group felt quite strongly on, and we hope that council will pick up and run with that. I understand some progress has already been made, and that funding for that task, that membership, is actually available from government. The other thing that is quite interesting is the one that we had down the bottom there of Sport Manawatu's Strength and Balance program, and that's a very good example of something that can actually be introduced. In this case, it's by Sport Manawatu, funded by ACC, where not only do the seniors get together for physical benefits, but it's the social activity that actually occurs as a result of that. And that's something that I'd sort of like to emphasise, that it's one thing to build lots of buildings, and if you look at annual and long-term plans, a lot of it is about the capital spend, but really for the group that certainly we are part of, and I'm certainly there, I'm 80 next year, so that actually, I think I'm well qualified to be part of it. And one thing that has happened is that since I retired from council and from other things, and get involved in those things, you become a little bit more aware of the needs that sometimes, because council here has such a wide framework of things to look at, you don't necessarily get down and identify specifically what is required in those groups. And that's actually something that perhaps I've become a little bit more aware of because I've joined that group involuntarily. No choice. So that's a very good example of it. Okay. One of the things we have spent a bit of time doing is learning about council, because a lot of the members of our group haven't had the exposure to council, other than what a lot of the public find out about is what they see through the mail and what they read in the newspaper. So we've actually had the opportunity with a few things to actually delve a little deeper and gain a better knowledge of how council works and what is happening. And you will see there one thing that it arose as a result of the Palmerston North Events program, but a theme came through as a result of that, and some other discussions about making events in this case, but I guess it's a wider thing, accessible to people in this case, people who are perhaps less mobile, but the accessibility is a very wide thing, and I have a feeling that some of the submissions we will comment on in the future will be around that. So accessibility certainly is something which we see as important to people of our group. And what we're looking forward to doing is providing views of interest to senior citizens for sure, but the mechanisms for that often are really the annual and long-term plans, and long-term plans in particular I think that we're probably going to more focused on. The annual plans, it's important obviously, and I can see some issues that would come through there, because if you look at the financial challenges that council are faced with over time, with investments in the wastewater and there's as much required in other areas as well, the level of rates to a community that has fixed income is actually going to be quite a challenge. So I guess that's something that we would probably be putting some input into.
Jim, I'll just get you to be finishing up now because the times are now.
That's really it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you. That's awesome. We've got a couple of questions. First of all, Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jim. Just two things. The one with Sport Manawatu. So you've got a program set up, or you're under discussions with Sport Manawatu about your program?
No, it's actually an initiative that Sport Manawatu have already taken, and they presented that to us, and I guess we saw that as actually quite an appropriate way of not only getting physically active but socially active. So we saw that, we're actually very much in favour of that.
Great. Second thing was
Sorry, and also the fact that it was actually, the City Library was looked at as the venue for that, we thought was quite appropriate too, because City Library is a good place for socialising here.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Second question was around safety and security. Do the seniors feel that that is an issue at all? Because you didn't mention it.
I didn't mention it, but it's a given that Palmerston North has registered as an international safe city, and we would definitely support that. I mean, if you live in a community where you feel unsafe, it's very much a disincentive to get out and socialise and get involved with things. So while we haven't actually focused on that as a subject, I'm sure fundamentally we would actually think that's so important to any city, and in particular to Palmerston North.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jim. Lovely to have you in the chamber. And thank you for your efforts to bring gender diversity to the Floral Arts Club. I'm sure they much appreciate it. I wanted to, you mentioned accessibility for events. And I was aware of a trial at Christmas in the Square where they had spaces for people with reduced mobility. Was your group involved in that, or have you had the opportunity to feed into it?
Not in that one particular, but one that was mentioned at our group was the Esplanade Day, where it wasn't easy to get parking near to where the exhibits were. And a suggestion that did come on the floor, and we haven't sort of passed it on but at this stage, but was providing some form of transport, local transport, that is at the venue, from the parking places to the actual stalls. That was something that actually came out in our discussions, yeah. But we hadn't focused specifically on the other one, but it's parallel, it has a parallel theme. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jim, for being here. Good to hear from you. My question, Madam Chair, is probably through you to staff. It was a matter raised around becoming an age-friendly city. My recollection is last term there was something done at this table that I had understood activated that. So could we get a comment from officers in terms of where that's at from an officer perspective and whether anything further is needed from the table?
Yes, through the CE. Okay, yeah. Stephanie, I think, will address this.
Kia ora koutou, Stephanie Valvin, Community Development Manager. There was a resolution at the Community Development Committee in September last year that the requests from Age Friendly Palmerston North for council to apply to become an age-friendly city be referred to the long-term plan process.
Just perhaps to expand on that, we were aware of the resolution and thought it was a little bit loose in that it wasn't actually approved, but it was referred to another forum. So it's why we're thinking it's quite important that just referring it to a forum doesn't necessarily achieve what we would like to see achieved.
Thank you for those clarifying points, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, Jim. Oh, sorry. Councillor Naylor,
Sorry,
I beg your pardon.
I thought you had me in your queue. I had a similar question around the age-friendly global network. Now, is there any further information to guide us in terms of what is stopping us, what has stopped us from already doing this? Is there a subscription rate, or is it a big tick box exercise, or is someone able to elaborate why it was just referred to the long-term plan as opposed to us progressing this sooner, I guess is what I'm trying to understand.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll ask Stephanie Valvin to comment again.
Kia ora. So it's not a small piece of work to apply for the accreditation. So currently it's not part of our work plan. We're not resourced to undertake that work. And so that's why it was referred to the long-term plan process. And in the lead up to that, we'll prepare some information around, what the resource might be required.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions? No? All right, well, thank you very much, Jim, and the rest of your group for all the mahi you're doing on behalf of the seniors of the city. We appreciate it. So I'm happy to move that we receive the presentation for information. Seconded, Councillor Finlay. And I'll open up if there's anyone who wants to make a comment. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment firstly as the council representative on the the reference group. I think we're extremely lucky with the quality of people that we have that applied for that. We have got a really good cross section of the community. Maybe, as Jim said, we're a little bit low on males, but we have got some very, very qualified people and very intelligent people. So I'm looking forward to seeing how effective they're going to be in the next year or so. The other comment I've got is on Age Friendly. Age Friendly Palmerston North is up and going, and it's doing quite well. But it's now waiting basically for the City Council. The group can not really go any further now until Council actually starts applying for the funding. Now there is a large pool of money available to help councils go ahead and apply for age-friendly status that can be applied to through the seniors, the Department of Seniors in the government. They have a fund available for that. The group itself can't apply for that, but the government, the local body, can apply for it. And if you look at places like Horowhenua, Hamilton, Auckland, Timaru, they are applying for it and getting ahead of us. So it's just sitting there waiting for the council to possibly apply for the money to go ahead and do it. So there is funding available to assist council in applying for age-friendly status. Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just like Councillor Finlay, just acknowledge the group. And I was somewhat surprised from the officer's reply that we're going to be another 15, 18 months or whatever till we get this aged accreditation underway, not started. Sorry, not in place, but actually started. So I would encourage the group to. Our annual plan process is coming up, and I'd encourage them to make some contact through the process and maybe push us along. The councillor's right. The ministry, the seniors ministry, actually does have funding available for this. It's not all the funding, but it is. It does help. So if this council wants this to happen, then we need to perhaps be prodding a little bit more. So. I encourage the group to do that, and it'll give us some sort of understanding what the community wants. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing on the subject of things you could submit to the annual budget, I appreciated the comments from the Chair about accessibility at council events. And I was delighted personally to see that trial going ahead that staff had done at Christmas in the square, but I think it was a very valid point made by the Chair that we could go further, faster on that. And I know I was at New Plymouth Festival of Lights over Christmas and had with me a family member who had mobility issues, and I was delighted to find that there was special parking put aside there, and from that place you were taken on a golf buggy down and dropped off into the heart of the event, which made it totally accessible for people with very limited mobility. You could also borrow wheelchairs, borrow motorised scooters, that kind of thing. And we've done some good work to start that kind of conversation here in Palmerston North. But as we reflect on our ageing population and those increasing needs, it may be appropriate that we look to put a bit of oomph behind that conversation, and that could appropriately come through the annual budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have an additional recommendation from Councillor Wood, which the administration team are just typing up. In the meantime, is there anyone else that wishes to comment? Councillor Wood. Okay, if you just hang for a minute, Councillor Wood. Councillor Naylor wishes to comment, I think.
Well, actually, it might be more useful to see what it is. But I'm happy to comment. I've really welcomed hearing the feedback from the seniors group, but in particular, the comments that are being made to ask them to come and resubmit at an annual budget process does frustrate me a little, because we've just heard them submit now. We've all heard what they're asking. Why can't we respond to that? I think sometimes we make things far too complicated for people that we engage with. I think we've heard them ask that question. I'd like to see us take some action from that today. If that's what Councillor Wood's recommendation is, I'll be very happy to support that, so perhaps I'll wait and hear about that. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Wood, would you like to speak to your additional recommendation?
Yes, just briefly, thank you, Madam Chair. Following on from Councillor Finlay's comments that there's funding available for applying to become an age-friendly city, it seems to me silly for us to wait until the long-term plan before investigating what's required to access that funding. Because when we get to the long-term planning stage, we'll be having to make considerations of how we weigh up and distribute funding, and if we know that we've already got a considerable potential subsidy here to do it, that will help us make an informed, good decision when we get to that point. If we look at this and don't apply until we're at the long-term planning stage, all it does is put us at a disadvantage because we'll be making decisions conditional upon obtaining the funding to do it. So, as Councillor Naylor just said, the group has indicated this is what they would like us to do. This is investigating what's required to apply. So if it comes back to us and it's going to be a massive cost to apply, okay, well perhaps we then defer it to our long-term planning and we look at it there. But if it's simply putting an application in and seeing if we can get the funding, I don't see any reason why we should wait. I don't see any reason why we should have them come back to the LTP to submit to get us to investigate doing this. So in my opinion, if it doesn't cost us anything, and it has potential upside, particularly for seniors in our area, let's at least look at doing it rather than waiting another 12 months before making or taking any action.
Right, well, let's open the floodgates, as we say in the business.
Apologies.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, just a very brief comment. I actually support this going forward. And just in terms of my experiences, that I was the area commander here in Palmerston North when we got the Safe City accreditation for the city. And I've assumed that the age-friendly accreditation would be a similar process, which is actually fairly complex. However, it doesn't need, because it's complex, doesn't mean to say that it's hugely expensive. When we did the Safe City accreditation, what we did is the organisations who are identified as key stakeholders actually made contributions in kind to achieve that. So it does not necessarily be a very expensive exercise, and I think it's worthwhile proceeding with. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll just point out that the debate is now standing between us and afternoon tea with our guests. So can I ask you to keep your comments short, please? Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I wondered if I could seek a comment from the CE, as the officer had indicated that this isn't in the current work programme, and I'm very supportive of it, but to do it, would we need a budget?
Thank you.
Through the Chair, I think the report back to the committee would be quite short, actually. It's just actually asking what is required to apply for age-friendly funding that would require just a bit of research on our behalf, I would think.
So could be done within existing budgets, this report. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Query through you as well, just around the timing of that and whether that information would be to hand in time to inform the annual budget deliberations.
Through the Chair, that might be a bit of a struggle. So because all this is asking for at this stage is what is required to apply for the funding. Whether or not you then accept to go to the next step or not is, we might provide some further options in the report. But I'm thinking it might be, let me rephrase that a little bit. If we're just looking to apply for age-friendly funding, then it's a matter of what the process is to go about doing that. Then we can see what programs might be delivered beyond that, perhaps in a further report, and then applying for the funding associated with it.
Thanks. If I can follow up with perhaps a more generalised question, and then we might consider adjournment. But through you, Madam Chair, is there a path that could get us to annual budget 23-24 rather than the long-term plan?
Through the Chair, councillors, at any particular point in time, you're able to bring other items into the budget process outside the annual plan program. So if you signed off your annual plan, as you're already aware, you do bring other projects into fruition at any particular point in time. So you have that ability.
Thank you.
Further comment, councillor, is that it?
That was just questions, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've still got 2 people more in the queue. Is there anyone else wishing to comment? Right, okay, Councillor Naylor.
My comment is that I support this, but I also think it probably should be slightly broader to include investigating what is required to apply for age-friendly status, because simply just applying for the funding without having an understanding of what is required for age-friendly status, I think the two should go together. So I'm just wondering if the mover and seconder would be willing to change the wording to include that. So I think that strengthens the recommendation, and I'm very happy to support it.
So do you want status instead of funding, or is it
Both.
status and funding?
It's both.
Okay.
So when we get the report back, so that we have an understanding of what is required to apply for age-friendly status, as well as what is required to apply for the age-friendly, oh yes, it's in there now, status and funding. Thank you, that covers it.
Comment on.
No, sorry, you can't, Councillor, because the Mayor is next in the queue. The Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor, you'll have to wait. I'm supportive, thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
I think you'll find if you approached age-friendly Palmerston North, they have all the requirements there in written form, so it's easily available. Just a phone call to the president, a chairperson, and she'll give it to you.
Okay. Back to you for right of reply, Councillor Wood.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I feel it speaks for itself.
Okay. In that case, we will vote. Are we happy to vote on the hands? So we'll take this one and the receiving the presentation at the same time. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, we will now adjourn for afternoon tea with our stakeholder guests, and we will be back at 3:10.
What a member of this committee I was here last year, and I'm just like... kind of.
You need to stay.
Right, well, if I just get you to take your seats and we'll resume the committee meeting. Just for information, we're going to swap items 8 and 9 around. So we'll have item 9 next, which is the presentation from the Manawatu Multicultural Council annual sector lead report. So I'll invite Stephanie and Nina from MMC. Haere mai.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Stephanie Valvin toka ingoa, ko Aotea Tumu Tautawhi Hapori. I'm Stephanie Valvin, Community Development Manager. Annual reports are being presented today from a further 4 of our 7 sector lead groups. Before I introduce the first report, just one piece of additional information which may provide some assurance around the data. For each of the 3 groups with how well and better off data, the sample size includes over 100 respondents. So this first report, annual report, is presented by the Manawatu Multicultural Council, or MMC. MMC provide leadership for the ethnic and newcomer community group sector in Palmerston North, and MMC and Council have a strong, positive relationship. Staff are working closely with the MMC team to support them to consolidate their recent growth. And I'm joined by Nina Kirschbaum, MMC President, to present.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair, and we are less people today. And thank you for having me here, and yeah. So my name is Nina. I'm from Manawatu Multicultural Council. So MMC has been operating in Palmerston North for 30 years this year. So as part of our celebration anniversary 30 years, we are taking part at the City Library, the Heritage Month, which is this weekend. There will be Saturday and Sunday. So if you guys can come, that will be good. That's the history of the Manawatu Multicultural Council. And that's the photos from Festival of Culture, where 9 out of the past president of MMC was there, as well as the mayor and the city councillors and the Rangitani. Our mission is to lead, support, and celebrate multiculturalism and ethnic diversity through participation and advocacy. Our vision is to grow an interconnected and inclusive society in Manawatu. We just finished our brochure about a few weeks ago, and that's what we do. We have a daily, weekly, monthly, bi-monthly activities, as well as networking, community support services, workshops and learning, and we also have some events, which is part of the Festival of Cultures, Tea and Kovis of the World Lantern Parade, we just have it, and this year we're going to have the World on Stage, which is every 2 years, and celebration of ethnic songs and praises. It was last year. And cultural celebration, we collaborate with other community organizations, other groups to celebrate their own culture. We do the holiday programs, annual dinner, Christmas lunch or parade. And the workshop there, we have, as you can see, there's a Te Tiriti o Waitangi workshop, first voice workshop, language classes. So far, we have about 7 different languages with the MMC. Leadership workshop, that's including the governance trainings for the MMC members, for the leaders. And last year, we had created the Youth Multicultural and educational workshop. There's a lot of educational workshop. This cannot be too long to talk about it. And the community safety talk that we had provided so far. This is just some of the photos of our project classes and activities at MMC. Within MMC, we have the language assistance services, and then we do the training for the translator and interpreter, and we do cooking demonstration. We have, we're gonna resume our potluck dinner again this month, which is we're gonna have the Filipino flavor, and then we're gonna do at the UCall. So as again, as usual, as before the COVID, that we're gonna have the potluck dinner with the countries, different countries theme every month, and then at different venue, just to give the community opportunity to see, you know, like where is UCall, where's Massey, and you know, where's the city council, and so on. So. What else? Yeah, so the upcoming event that the MMC organizing this month is the Heritage Month this weekend, and we're gonna also have the Race Relation Day on Monday the 20th at Te Manawa, and the potluck dinner on the Friday the 30th. Yeah, and I guess you guys have read the report, and if there's any question, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nina and Stephanie. So I'll open it up for questions, councillors. Does anyone have a question? Councillor Mickled.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Nina, for the report. I just want to probably get some understanding around the computing courses Collaborate with Digits, and what's the intake like, and can you please just explain to us how that program looks like on the ground and the success of it?
Yes, so this is the second year. So last year we did a pilot project with a computing class, because it was the, we hear community voices. You know, some people, they don't know much about computer, you know, digital and technology and so on, and then they can't afford to go to the course. So that's why then we collaborate with the Digits, who provide the computer course, and then they can also give some laptop. And then so it's been successful, and this is the second year because it was been successful, and people keep, you know, wanted to do course again, so we redo it again. Yeah, so unfortunately with the computer classes, because it has to be limited participants, you know, but every week they have a different different program, so they're happy to accommodate what people need in the area of, you know, learning about computer, you know, learning about how to create the email, for example, the first week, and then yesterday they're learning about, you know, how to save in the banking and then scam, something like that. So. And we are aiming for those community, the vulnerable community, because we also experience the people telling us, you know, they've been scammed, you know, and then they've been, running out of money because they didn't realize that it was a scam. Yeah.
And what's the intake like? For the big program? Or?
It is a big program. It's a 10 weeks course. So you have to finish the 10 weeks course, and then the Digit's gonna give you the certificate. The participant, so like yesterday, maybe about 90 to 100 within those 10 weeks. Yeah. Like I said, it is unfortunate, you know, it's limited because also we have limited space, and then the teacher who's teaching it is, you know, is really challenging, because some people who are not really speaking English, then they always need some help, assistance, so on.
Interesting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just have a question, Nina.
Yes.
You've mentioned a couple of points in your report about needing more resources in order to, I guess...
running the centre.
Yeah, and also to sort of meet the potential for support that you can see. So is that primarily financial resources, or are there other resources that you're needing that you think would be useful?
Both. financial and, financially meaning is for us to get more support resources in staffing. For example, as you can see, how many events and then activities that we do, we are mostly relying on the volunteers doing all those activities. But like the big event, like Festival of Culture and then Wall on Stage is a lot of times to take. So at the moment, we managed to hire an event coordinator, but she's a contractor at the moment, just because we have some, extra budget in there. But then we are waiting for the manager. We're in the hiring process of the manager. So luckily that we have the event coordinator and then we have the admin. I guess because I'm just thinking, being the sector lead now, whether that the SPG grant for MMC can be increased, because what we use for those SPG grant is basically for the manager at the moment. Even the admin itself, we getting a bit from here and there. So I would say we don't have those sustainability funding for staff, where and also because now I feel like it's more demand that people want to collaborate with us, like, MMC have been managed to give the contribution, for example, to the 1,000 day strategy plan with the Te Whatu Ora, giving us as a multicultural voice. And then I'm also on the board with the Te Papaioa locality plan with the Iwi Maori Partnership Board. And there's so many other organizations and groups that would like to, collaborate with us, because we are the Multicultural Council, we are the ethnic community voice, then I'll be happy to, pass on our community voice.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Are there any other questions?
Adding information, we managed to granted the professional level 3 accreditation and social service last year, and we also received the Better Outcomes Award from the Public Sector Commission. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, prompted by yours. Thank you, Nina and Stephanie, for being here. Just around kind of the amounts of requests that you're getting from different groups within MMC, do you feel like that's gone up or stayed about the same or gone down, kind of from before and after you got this recognition as a strategic kind of partner? Like, did that kind of
it's gone up.
Activate more people thinking, right, this is the place to go to?
Yes, it is gone up. It's very much gone up than before, because I'm also, in my leadership, I try to collaborate more with other groups, with other organizations, rather than overlapping or, kind of like doing the same activities, but, different. So kind of like, okay, we collaborate, for example, with the digit, with the computer, I know, rather than we create one, there's already one. And then also kind of like the holiday program, we work together with the Sport Manawatu, and so people knows that we've been working together collaboratively with others, and then they hear that, and they, the demand is more coming. And then also about, now I'm just saying the clinical services plan for the entire Mid-Central district also come to us, to contribute our voice from the ethnic communities. And that's also another thing that's coming. And the, like the age concern with the Lion Clubs, they also want the MMC to be part of the board as well, because knowing that we are, Palmy is growing, as we all know, and then the diversity in the city, in Palmy is really multicultural, so, yes.
Thanks, that's helpful further insight. I guess, Stephanie, could I follow up then to understand kind of the nature and term, the length of the funding agreement, and if a group experiences significant growth in demand during that term, like kind of what happens, if anything?
So the current agreements are 3-year partnership agreements. So that's adjusted annually for CPI. So there's not a formal opportunity to request more funding during that period. We support groups to look at other opportunities for funding, so working with the likes of the Ministry for Ethnic Communities, DIA, etc.
Thanks, and I guess acknowledging that this is, as I understand it, kind of a piloting of things before we get to the long-term plan and hopefully continue doing this kind of, is there, at this stage, would you say there's potentially learnings around kind of the need to be able to scale within a 3-year period sometimes?
Yeah, I would say it's early days, and we might bring some thoughts on that when we report on the trial itself.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you both, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That would appear to be it for questions. So thank you very much, Stephanie and Nina, for your reports. So I'm happy to move that the committee receive the memorandum entitled Annual Sector Lead Report, Manawatu Multicultural Council, presented to the committee on the 15th of March 2023. Seconded Councillor Hancock. Are there any comments? Councillor Mickelad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, just want to acknowledge the work that MMC and the board are doing, especially under difficult circumstances. So I just want to thank the team for the work that they're doing in the community. And they've done extremely well under tough and challenging circumstances. We've had COVID, which has restrained a lot of their activities or constrained a lot of their activities, and also funding issues, which does not really allow them to do everything that they want to do, but have been able to operate and host events under such financial constraints. And as a council's representative to MMC, I just want to acknowledge them and really looking forward to working with them along with the team and to build a connected and inclusive community in the future. So well done, team.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'd just like to comment that I think it's become clear that the demands on MMC are far outstripping the resources of MMC. And I think Councillor Barrett's questions clearly brought that out, but I'm also aware of that myself just from the day-to-day. And I think it's something that perhaps we might need to be aware of as we learn through these pilots of the lead sector agreements, that by identifying a group as a lead sector organisation, we are sort of putting the spotlight on them in the community, and others may then feel that they are the go-to group to provide resources, advice, information, which is great, but on the limited resources and the primarily volunteer nature of many of these organisations, I think we do need to just watch out that we're not creating a lot of expectation, I suppose, and work for people and not resourcing it. So that's something to bear in mind. I'll just add my thanks to those of Councillor Mickelad. I know, Nina, you and the committee have been working extremely hard and even at the moment covering for the manager's role. So congratulations for all that you've achieved. It's a huge list when we see it in the report and highly impressive, so well done. Okay, no further comments, so we'll vote on the hands to receive the memorandum. So all in favour? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Right, so we will go back to item 8, which is the lead sector report from Te Pū Harakeke. I'll invite Tim Kendrew, Manager, and Stephanie Velvin to present. Thank you.
The second group presenting their annual report is Te Pū Harakeke Community Collective, formerly known as Palmerston North Community Service Council. Council and Te Pū Harakeke have a long history of collaboration, in particular around capacity and capability building for the not-for-profit, for-purpose sector. Office's overall assessment of Te Pū Harakeke is that they're performing well across the board. And I'll hand to Tim Kendrew, Manager, to present.
Thank you. Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, Councillors. Tēnā koutou. Ko Tim Kendrew ahau, ko kai whakahaere mātua au ki Te Pū Harakeke Community Collective Manawatu. I was going to acknowledge our chairperson, Kim Penny, but she has left. But other board members are here, Kate Applin, Cam Jenkins and Courtney Manu. Still here? Yep, good. I'll just give a bit of background and assume that you've read the report. So Te Pū Harakeke was formed 52 years ago and known until last year as the Palmerston North Community Services Council, collective body for community and social services agencies in Palmerston North and the broader Manawatu. We have more than 100 community groups who are members. Most of those, about 95%, are not-for-profits, a few individuals and a few government agencies that are working in that space as well. Our vision is to see a strong, vibrant and connected community sector in the Manawatu, and our mission is to empower community groups to participate in and contribute to the community and its well-being. So how do we do that? We provide affordable professional development and training opportunities for community workers, facilitate connections, networking and information sharing across the sector, advocate for the sector's interests and the interests of the communities our members work with, who are often the most vulnerable in our city. And the activities that we've done in that 6-month period are outlined in the report. Just want to say thank you for your ongoing financial support for Te Pū Harakeke as an organisation and also for the community sector more generally. I know that you are interested in the findings from the Social Wellbeing Forum that we held in October. So the report for that is pretty much finished and will be out in the next couple of weeks, but some highlights for you. Just as a reminder for those who don't know, the Social Wellbeing Forum was established in 2007 and aims to gather insights from the community sector and those working on the front line as to what the kind of key issues are in the welfare space. And we produce a report to help decision-making and for other stakeholders. So none of this will be particularly surprising to you, but the first finding is that housing is the biggest issue facing our communities that our kaimahi are working with. To address this, we will continue to advocate for council to develop more social housing and to do whatever you can to encourage housing development throughout the city. And I think worth noting, listening to presentations earlier, housing of various kinds and sizes to meet various needs throughout the city. One other thing in that housing space is that we think some work needs to be undertaken potentially between the sector, council and government agencies in streamlining the way that people can access support, especially those who need urgent help. There has been some cases of people just being bounced around a bit. We see that at Hancock House. And yeah, I think that probably the sector has some of the resources it needs, but we all just need to work on that a bit. We'll have some more about that in the report. The other main issue is the cost of living, of course, and we would remind you that as much as the cost of living impacts on businesses and homeowners in the city, that it has a disproportionate impact on those who are in the most vulnerable position in our city. When it comes to community organisations, most organisations are reasonably confident in their capability, but they're less confident in their capacity, in particular staffing, resource, time that they have to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. We do want to point out that organisations struggle to employ the staff they need. You will be aware that within council, when you're trying to employ staff, that you need to provide a competitive wage, really, is what it comes down to. And the only way that we can increase capacity in the sector is to increase the workers. So really it comes down to funding, and it feels like it always comes back to that. But if we keep getting the same funding that we've received in the past, it doesn't go as far as it used to. That's all I really want to say, so happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Tim. Just a question from me. You've touched on it. Nina has touched on it from MMC, and I note that Housing Advice also touched on it on their report, that recruitment and retention of people in the community sector is an emerging issue, I suppose. Can you just expand on that a bit? Is that a fair assessment?
I think that is a fair assessment, and we've seen it across the kind of job market over the last year that it really has been an employees market, but the social and community sector hasn't been able to address that by increasing wages because their funding hasn't changed. You're all involved in community agencies. You'll see that vacancies take a long time to be filled, and it is a struggle to find people with the right qualifications, especially when you're looking for things like counsellors or roles that require a specific qualification. We just have to be able to provide a competitive wage to attract them.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. So I have Councillor Michelad in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, team, for the report. I think mine is just a point of clarification, just to give me some sort of understanding and context, which will lead to some of the reflection that you made around, in conclusion, around the report. The number one thing that I probably had in your report, you have identified 7 government agencies that are engaged in social and community work. I'm assuming Kainga Ora will be one of them, MSD and ethnic communities. What are the other 4?
Actually, neither of those two, but things like the public health unit at Mid Central. I am having a mind blank on the others. The electorate office, for example. So we just count them separately because we don't want to claim that they are representing the community sector, which is why we put those numbers differently.
Okay, cool. No, thank you. Second question is around section 4, your report on page 27, around reflections and conclusions. You've identified 3 things that should be brought to our attention ahead of the long-term plan cycle. Funding is one of them, and you mentioned that availability of funds and long-term security of funding. What is the current state of play, and if you may, can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, that really comes from comments from the sector when we were preparing for the Social Wellbeing Forum around what did they need. And funding, I think, will always be a conversation when we come to this table and others, but organisations struggle when we are reliant on short-term funding. So if we get a grant or a contract for 1 year, you can only employ someone for 1 year. It becomes much harder to get any kind of momentum when you're planning a program 1 year at a time. Council have the SPG, which is 3 years, so that's really helpful. But we would just say that the longer term we can do, the better it would be for the sector. Obviously, there are practicalities around that in your budget setting and things like that that we have to consider. But from the sector's perspective, the longer term, the better, yeah.
Cool. That's very helpful to know. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steph and Tim, for the report. And my question is about reporting. It's been something that, I don't know if you've mentioned it, Tim, but certainly your predecessor had. So in 3.3 and 4 of your report, Steph, you talk about the different funding streams that Council provides for Te Puharakeke. And I wanted to find out if we've managed to amalgamate the reporting for those funding streams, or is Te Puharakeke having to report separately against each of those funding items?
We have amalgamated them all into one contract. I haven't talked to Steph about that, so I've identified a few niggly issues, and that some of those were reporting every 12 months, and now it looks like 6 months because it's brought in with the other, but that's just teething issues, I think. But there's definitely a benefit in amalgamating those, and that we're not renegotiating contracts every 12 months, which was really getting ridiculous. Yeah.
Good. I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Tim and Steph. Just a couple of questions. The first one really is just going back to page 27 again. There's one of the reflections in there is around coordination and connection between services. I just wonder if you could perhaps expand on that in terms of what is actually meant by that, and do you have any insights into how we can improve that?
In terms of what we mean by that, it's comments that have come up repeatedly when we've been kind of consulting with the sector, and possibly people have different meanings about that. But from my perspective, it's about ensuring that within the sector, people know what other organisations are going on so that they know when we can, I guess, collaborate better. I think I said here that we see that particularly as a big part of our role as a sector lead is in trying to help people to build those relationships, make the right connections. But really it just comes down to, that whole networking thing, and that people need to know each other to be able to work the most effective way that we can. And we're blessed in Palmerston North that we're a good size for that. And people do know each other, but we just have to keep working on that. There's a lot of new people in the sector all the time that don't necessarily have those connections. And I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And just in terms of the Social Wellbeing Forum report, I look forward to seeing that. You mentioned housing and cost of living as being sort of key themes within that report. Was there anything mentioned there around youth at risk, and is there any capacity in that area for a bit of coordination in that part?
I think that the coordination and connectedness goes across all areas that we're working, so there's certainly capacity there to look at that. It wasn't one of the huge themes. One of the themes that we did notice as something that hadn't come up in previous social wellbeing forums was young people not being very connected with their communities or engaging. A few organisations raised how students who are disconnected during COVID from kind of the education system then also disconnect from the health system and other social supports. So that was something that had come up and that we reflect on a little bit in the report. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And that forum is going to be held every 2 years, is that correct?
That's the plan, yes.
Great, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
That was my question, thanks.
Okay. Right, that's questions done. Thank you very much, Tim and Stephanie. So I'll move that we receive the memo entitled Annual Sector Lead Report Te Puharakeke Community Collective presented to Community Committee on 15th March 2023. Seconded Councillor Hancock, and I'll open for any comments. Well, as I am the council representative appointed to Te Puharakeke, I will formally thank the organisation for all that they do on behalf of the community sector. I think we are extremely lucky in Palmerston North and the wider Manawatu that we have such an organisation providing connection, training and support to community groups. And I know that there's a lot of thought goes into the offerings for community groups, and that people in the sector appreciate the training in particular and the support for their organisation. So thank you very much for your mahi on behalf of us all. And I'd also just comment that there are a couple of themes that came out of that lead sector report that we need to bear in mind. In particular, the fact that community organisations are not immune to the pressures of retaining the workforce and the pressures of inflation. And when we're considering community funding, we need to be aware that organisations that receive grants from us also need to make sure that their funding enables them to retain staff, good staff in the roles. And I'm very aware that a number of organisations have really struggled to recruit staff who have had vacancies for long periods of time. So it's an issue across all areas, but as I say, community sector isn't immune to it. So if there are any other comments? No? Okay, in that case, we will vote to receive the memo. So we'll vote on the hands. So all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. So we'll move to item 10, which is the annual sector lead report from Te Tihi o Ruahine Whanahura Alliance. So I invite Stephanie Velvin and Mataroa Ma and Stacey Saravatu to come and present to us. Nā mai haere mai and welcome.
This next annual report is from Te Tihi o Ruahine Whānau Ora Alliance, who provide the strategic leadership and backbone support functions for the Ora Connect Alliance within the southwestern suburbs of Palmerston North. Te Tihi are a new partner in this funding period, and Ora Connect is a relatively new initiative which continues to develop towards achieving community wellbeing aspirations. I'll hand to Materoa Ma, Chief Executive, and Stacey Serevatu, Project Manager for Te Tihi, to present.
Ahi Maria kia koutou katoa. Ko ai au, ko Stacey Serevatu tōku ingoa. Heuri tēnei ngō Ngāti Porou, tūwhare toa me Taranaki hoki. Hello everyone, I'm Stacey and I hail from the iwi of Ngāti Porou, tūwhare toa and Taranaki. And I am a kaimahi based at Te Tihi o Ruahine Whānau Ora Alliance, and I play a small part to the backbone or container of change to the Ora Connect Alliance. So I'm going to assume everyone's read the report and a little bit about Ora Connect, but just to give a breakdown, we have a bit of a blurb, 30-word blurb-ish, just to give you guys some understanding. So through strong relationships, leadership across multiple sectors and meaningful representation and leadership of tangata whenua, rangitane, iwi and whānau, Ora Connect is connecting whānau residing in the 4412 or southwestern suburbs to opportunities that will improve their economic, environmental, social and health outcomes, resulting in a connected, healthy community. So since submitting our 6 monthly report, we have, the Ora Connect Alliance have met on the 22nd of February, and the container of change, which is the role that Te Tihi o Ruahine play, facilitated the second workshop of a 2-part series that gave focus to 3 key areas. The first one was a refresher of our Collective Impact, Collective Impact 3.0, which derives from the Tamarack Institute, and we provide biannual training to we're committed to providing biannual training around collective impact to our partners to ensure that they are kept up to date with any changes, and also to provide an opportunity to refresh their memories, as well as we have people coming in and out from the respective organisations all the time. The second key area of that workshop was a refresher of our program of action. So we've had a program of action that's been in place since inception, which was in about 2019, and we're working through refreshing that. We acknowledge that there have been a lot of changes within our environment, and so we have, as an alliance, looked at what is now a priority, and some of that includes identifying some key processes and documentation, revisiting our community aspiration being a connected, healthy community, revisiting our membership and its requirements, clarifying roles and responsibilities, and how to provide feedback from partners, which was a main drive from this report, requirements. And the third key highlight was highlighting strategic learning, which has been something that, as an alliance, we've been wanting to work towards achieving for the last maybe year and a half. Obviously, that comes down to funding. I didn't want to say that, but it does at the end of the day. And there's a lot that's required. There's infrastructure, building infrastructure, having the right people at the table, and so on and so forth. But to get the ball rolling, we, as part of our workshops, we highlighted strategic learning and then started to identify as an alliance what data points we require as part of a community data profile that is being developed currently behind the scenes within Te Tihi. And this will be key to highlighting opportunities in the 4412. Just want to acknowledge Steph and Amy for your continued support, and also all of you here today for allowing us to do allowing us to be able to function as a backbone so that AutoConnect can continue doing what it's doing. Kia ora. Any questions?
Thanks very much, Stacey. That's awesome. So we'll open up for questions. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. Ngā mihi kia kōrua, mō tō pānui. E toru ngā pātai. I have 3 questions. One relates to page 44 of the officer's report, talking about funding diversity, shall we say. I was just wondering how much administrative resource is spent on sourcing, finding and applying for funding applications and the reporting processes?
So currently we do a lot of in-kind mahi, not just us as a backbone, but across our partners as well. In saying that we pretty much, we're very, what's the word? We try not to be, but we can be reactive. So we have squads that are operating, they are designing initiatives, sustainable initiatives. They move it into an implementation, and then it's and within that phase there that we're trying to apply for funding. So as we go, we are trying to look for, continuously trying to look for funding. Anything else, Matiroa? Yeah, so it's literally constantly trying to find it. Yeah, so that we can just get on and do what we need to do. Otherwise, it delays what needs to be done, and unfortunately, whānau miss out at the end of the day.
Kia ora, thank you. My second question, there was a mention talking about community gardens, that might be page 53, and it says here currently advocating for 3 more on PNCC land in 2023. I'm just wondering where those are at. Is that Savage Garden or Savage Crescent rather, or something else?
Well, you see, today I actually wanted to present to you a video which I had captured from all of our squad leads. So all of our squads are led by people that are out in the community doing this mahi. But then I got told I had to reduce it to 3 minutes or something. So unfortunately, I don't have the answer for you because I'm not the right person to provide that. But I have a video that I can send to you that will have some of that a lot of this information in it, and it comes from those that are on the ground actually doing the mahi. Sorry.
That sounds great. I would love to see it.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt you there, Councillor. The Chief Executive has advised that we can circulate the video to councillors, so they'll be able to watch it at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll leave mine there. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. My question is kind of just reflecting that we're starting a journey into this partnership model around funding, and just wondered if the Alliance at this stage has any views or reflection on kind of the reporting framework that kind of goes with that funding, and whether it's helpful from your perspective in terms of expressing what you're achieving, what you're passionate about.
Thanks for the question. Ngā mihi kia koutou. It could be a little bit early in thinking about what kinds of opportunities there are to be, changing the way that things are reported. So I think it's a thing that we will be able to learn as we go. I do think it's good to always be able to have different mediums. So video, and because you'll get more stories, you'll actually see the community participating. The very question that was asked about the kai, about the gardens, those kind of things. But I think it's good. The thing that I think is really good is that the council is open to actually engaging in those conversations. So I think that's a good pathway.
Great, thanks for the feedback. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Don't have anyone else in the queue. Okay, so that's it for questions. Thank you very much, Steph and Stacey and Mataroa. Thank you. So I will move that the committee receive the memo entitled Annual Sector Lead Report Te Tihi Ruahine Whānau Ora Alliance, presented to the Community Committee on 15th of March 2023. Councillor Hancock will second, and I'll open up for any comments. Councillor Zabellin.
Kia ora, thank you. I just wanted to highlight something in this report that jumped out at me, particularly on page 52. There is a summary of Kai Security, and then there is a list underneath of all of the things that have been achieved through this alliance for Kai Security in the 4412 just last year, and it's a phenomenal list. The quote that stuck out at me was looking at all areas of the spectrum from whānau having access to pātaka kai, growing kai, and creating other opportunities that lead to kai resilience and sovereignty. I absolutely am thrilled that we have an organisation, or we have many organisations, but this one particularly looking at all aspects of how whānau engage with food beyond the supermarket. And it's not just about putting a garden in, it's about knowing what to do with it at what time of the year and what to do with the food once you've grown it. It's a whole journey, and the list on page 52 and 53 just shows that is being embedded in our community all over the place, and I'm thrilled. Awesome work. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just comment to say thank you very much on behalf of Council for the work that you're doing in the western and southern suburbs, and I think it's very useful for us to hear about your approach, because it's quite a unique approach, and I think there'll be quite a lot of benefit to Council in hearing from your organisation on a regular basis about how you're getting your projects going, how it's working, and there'll be some good learning in that, I think, for us that we might be able to take to other groups. So I'm very grateful that you're part of the reporting back, and look forward to hearing more about how your projects are going. Thank you. Okay, no further comment. So we will go to vote then on the hands. So all those in favour of receiving the memo? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, so that takes us on to item 11, which is the annual sector lead report from Housing Advice Centre. I'll invite Stephanie Valvin, Peter Gray and Lynn Clough to come down. It might just be Peter and Stephanie. Harimai, when you're ready.
Kia ora. The final annual report being presented to the committee today is from the Housing Advice Centre. Housing Advice have been supporting the community for nearly 40 years and have a long-standing relationship with Council. They've navigated recent challenges and capacity well, taking the opportunity to review their overall strategic role. And I'm joined by Peter Gray, Housing Advice Centre Chair, to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Toko. Councillors. I need to just put an apology for Lynn. She's been unfortunately called back to the office to deal with something. I'm just listening to the previous speakers as well. It did really reflect on what we've been going through as an organisation, not just at a operational level, but also a governance level. And so we're still got a wee way to go with that, and some real challenges coming to us. But out of that, I'd also like, I've been in touch with council staff, but also our other major funders right from the start to bring them up to speed. And I'd like to just acknowledge the support that we've received from Stephanie and her team, but also the staff from DIA and MSD. And they've always indicated to us the value that they saw within our organisation. Our previous speakers already talked about all those challenges, and I can only agree with everything they've been saying. I think the cost of living impact on organisations is, and our capability to actually resource and remunerate our key staff at a level that they can actually afford to work in the sector. Because we've got people who would love to work in the sector, love to work in organisations right across the sector, but they're in their own situations where they can't actually afford to do that. And that's going to be a challenge moving forward. I'll take our report as being read. There has been other impacts on some of our service delivery, particularly our programs that we ran in schools. With the COVID restrictions and so forth, no one was allowed to go in. And so we've got some people who've left school who haven't had the opportunity to go through our Ready to Rent program or actually get some of the basic understanding what it is to be going into a rental situation, becoming a tenant or becoming a flatmate, whatever that might look like for them. But fortunately this year we'll be able to reopen that all up, and that's what our plan is. We also want to expand around our work with other organisations. We want to do some training the trainers so we can give some base knowledge within each of the organisations. And in light with that, I know that you've got a report coming up from Stephanie later around the application to the Local Innovation and Partnership Fund at HUD. That is something that really excites me. And it has already excited me because I think we've really benefited from the fact that it's pulled some organisations together to work alongside Stephanie and the team. And I think that potentially if we can develop that shared strategic direction around all groups who are working within the housing sector, and particularly the housing needs sector, then we will be building a greater collective impact modelling and collaboration amongst organisations. I was very pleased with the from the report from Te Tihi, which I'd like to acknowledge, around the homelessness issue and the fact that they called it housing insecurity. I think that's a far better term because it actually captures what it is actually like for the people that we're working with. I'd also like to think that and thank Council for putting in some more officer time into around this application. Application's been completed, been submitted, decision making is a wee way off, but we're going to keep having meetings with the organisations who have been part of that, and hopefully look at inviting extra people, organisations, particularly fellow organisations from the Housing Needs Monitoring Group, to see their ideas are getting involved. But I think even if the unfortunate thing happens that we don't get the funding, I'd like to think those conversations will keep going. I think it creates an opportunity not only to ensure that at an operational level across all the organisations that we can deliver the best service delivery model for the people coming through, but that it can be a really flexible model. So it's not just one organisation working with them, then they've got to go to another organisation, that we can actually bring all the different types of services or touch points that the individuals might need, and almost build like a bespoke type service around each situation. I'm sorry if I'm stealing all your thunder there, Stephanie. But looking at the Housing First model and what it could look like in this area, I think we don't want to just bring the model from somewhere else. We've got to be able to shape that into how it could work here. And I think that's a decision that we need to look at, because we can't just say we're bringing that to Palmerston North and that's going to fit the community, because we've got to think of communities within community and then individuals within those separate communities about what's the model that will fit for them. I also think that it's an opportunity not only to share the operational deliveries from across the partners, but also look at a governance level, around sharing at governance level, around the skills that that sit within governance across all these organisations, and how can it actually help other organisations to strengthen themselves. So I'll just leave it at that, and I'll open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Stephanie. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to ask around your Ready to Rent program. On page 63 here, you say that you have a presence in the wider community, delivering workshops in local secondary schools, but I note on page 59, it says that the total number of workshops held in schools was 0. I was just wondering if that was a mistake or if it's the program's just getting, what's going on there?
It was basically due to the COVID restrictions, and the restrictions that carried on with these, particularly secondary schools. You know, it's been a very difficult time for them to get pupils back into school, and that was their focus. But now we're looking at opening that back up.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Peter, just a question from me around the figures that we've got. I mean, they are in the officer report, so maybe it's a question for Stephanie, I'm not sure. But anyway, around total number of clients engaged with Housing Advice Centre, 2,540. That seems like quite a high number. Is that, how are you counting that?
That can be through not only face-to-face people coming in, but it could also be through inquiries, also through social media and that type of thing as well.
Okay. So, and then you've got 100% response rate from clients saying that they gained knowledge or skills, but you wouldn't have surveyed all of those 2,500, would you?
No, it's the 100% of the people who actually replied to the survey.
So roughly how many would that be?
Oh, I'd need to find that out from Lynn, but I'll do that and I'll send that through to you.
All right. Oh, sorry, Stephanie, you've got it, have you? Yeah?
Yeah, so it's 186.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's great. Councillor Bowen, are you in the queue there?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Peter and Steph. In your report, you say you have a service coordinator and 2 housing advisors. Then I see in Steph's report you have 7 volunteers. That seems not very many people to service 2,500 contacts. So I just wondered if you could say more about how that works.
Okay. The volunteers included board members, of course, committee members, I should say. But also we had a volunteer who, for a short period of time, was working to support some admin. We had a paid contract around admin, but before that, we actually had a previous employee who actually volunteered some time for us.
So most of the, not that board work isn't work, but most of the actual housing advice work is done by those 3 paid employees and then your 1 extra during the year?
Yep, that's correct. And that's why we rely so much on our partnering with other organisations, such as the Tenants' Union that we've got a memorandum with, and also MoneyWise as well.
Thank you, that makes sense. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Peter. Stephanie, thank you for your report. I just wanted to know, Peter, if you wouldn't mind just stretching out your knowledge and understanding of the term that you use, collective impact.
Sorry. My understanding, well, from our practice, we're looking at how do we actually individualise the services for people, but we do it by not only trying to do it as a one organisation model, that it's a shared organisation model, but it could be led by the one organisation. So people have a key point of contact or partner, if they like, or whatever it could be, and they work through that person. That person works with the whānau to whānau whānau or the individual to say, okay, let's work out a plan, and we stage each area of that plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Stephanie. Peter, my question's for you, and it's thank you for sharing the slides. The first slide there refers to the aim. It was the slide that you were on. Sorry, the cover slide. And in the aim, it says it's talking about people, and it says to be productive members of society. Can I just ask what the centre's definition is of being productive?
A productive member of society needs to be at a situation where they feel valued in society. We're dealing with a lot of people who their value has been taken away from them, and they're struggling with that. So we want to put them into a situation where they think they can, well, not only think that they can, actually look at contributing back to not only the wider society, but also to people closer to them as well. Support, become a supporter for the supported and so forth.
So, not to put words in your mouth, but am I hearing there a fairly expansive definition of productivity?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's how do people reactivate themselves as being part of our community?
Thank you.
Because at the moment they feel very devalued and they don't feel...
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think that's it for questions. Yep. So thank you very much, Peter and Stephanie. So I'm happy to move that we receive the memorandum entitled Annual Sector Lead Report Housing Advice Centre, presented to the Community Committee on 15th of March 2023. Seconded Councillor Hancock. I'll open up for any comments. I'll just start by saying thank you very much, Peter. I know that Housing Advice Centre has gone through a testing time, but it seems like you're coming out the other side now. And I think we've heard from a number of organisations today about how housing is a significant priority in the community. And so that coordination work and, one-to-one client work is still very much needed. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I don't know if there's any other comments. Nope. Okay, so we will move to vote to receive the memo on the hands then. All in favour? Yep, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so next item is item 12, which is the Welcoming Communities Annual Update. It's on page 65. And it's presented by Stephanie Velvin and Samaya Gaffrey. So, welcome back, Steph. Welcome for the first time, Samaya. Over to you.
Tēnā koutou. Stephanie Velvin, Community Development Manager, and I'd also like to introduce Samaya Gaffrey, who started with us in June last year in the role of Community Development Advisor for Welcoming Communities. I'd then also like to start by acknowledging that today, March 15th, marks 4 years since 51 people were killed in an anti-immigrant attack in Christchurch. I'm sure we all remember how shocking that day was, and it was a wake-up call for New Zealand and the world, and certainly provided us locally an additional resolve to continue our progress in the Welcoming Communities program, which at its heart is a proactive initiative designed to prevent the divisions that can cause these sorts of tragic events and create connected, safe, resilient communities. We've had a reminder with a recent incident in our city that there is still work to be done. Strengthening and celebrating our Welcoming Communities efforts sends a strong message that racism and hate will not be tolerated here in Palmerston North. On that note, I'm pleased to provide the 5th annual Welcoming Communities update to the committee today. Samaya's appointment means that the program has returned to full strength and we're back on track in terms of delivering the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group plan. And we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Are there any questions? Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a very quick question, just around the Welcoming Schools Framework pilot and 10 schools. Does that involve the schools as well as the school boards?
Kia ora. It's the schools, so they're the Welcoming Schools coordinator. She goes to schools and talks to their principals and their ESOL teachers.
So the school boards themselves are not involved in the process?
Not at this stage, not yet.
Planned?
It hasn't actually been a consideration so far, so the conversations with principals and the other school staff have been really productive. But there could be a consideration in the next phase.
Yep, thanks, Steph. And just the other question is just around the revision of the advisory group plan that expires this year. So due for a rewrite this year?
Yes, so it's through to the end of this year, and we hope to apply for accreditation around November, and then there will be some feedback through that process which will inform the next plan. So it'll probably be late this year, very early next year, that the following plan will be developed.
Great, thanks, Steph. Thanks,
Maya. Is that it? Yep. Thank you. No, that's fine. I wasn't sure you took a breath and I thought maybe there was another question coming. That's fine. Steph, I just wondered if you could talk about how and on what occasions you've been able to sort of share the learnings from Palmerston North's experience with Welcoming Communities with some of the other newer communities to the Welcoming Communities programme?
Yeah, there have been quite a few opportunities. So there's a regular Teams meeting between all the coordinators in the country, and so not so much these days with Samaya on board, but have provided lots of information, sharing resources through that network. And in the recent National Hui in November, we were both in attendance and shared lots of our learnings to the new council, some of which were just sort of a few weeks into the program. So that was a good opportunity.
Awesome, thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. In your cover reports, you talk about, where have I lost it? Welcoming Week campaign. Excellent. And welcoming packs being distributed through the Palmerston North Hospital for new staff arriving in the city. I'm assuming that's because they're a large employer, and wondered if we take the same approach with other large employers in the city.
Thank you. So I had the HR from the hospital contacting me to ask for the welcome packs, and I provided it to them, but I have also provided it to education providers like UCall, IPU and Massey, and I will be providing it to anyone who requests it.
Is there scope, rather than wait for it to be request, for us to go to large employers and see if it's something they'd be interested in engaging with? Can we be more proactive in that space?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, that's a good answer. And my second question was about, it actually came from a comment that the Pacifica Reference Group made this morning in their presentation, which was about visible expressions of culture, people seeing themselves, and they referenced to Marae o Hine that if you are Pacifica, you wouldn't see your culture represented. And I know that's an action in the plan under something or another, welcoming public spaces. So I wanted to ask how we connect the work of welcoming communities with, say, for example, our Pacifica reference group, so that people can know that work is going on and participate in it.
So one of the plans that I have for this year that I'm going to bring it to the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group is to have a tour of the public art spaces so that the communities are aware of it, and if they need any assistance from us, then we will take it from there.
And maybe if I just add, the advisors supporting welcoming communities and the Pacifica reference group sit in the same team, and so we're often sharing and collaborating on ideas that will have mutual benefit.
And forgive me if this is written down and I'm just not seeing it, but are the Pacifica reference group all involved in welcoming communities officially, or is that an informal link?
The Ministry for Pacific People have a seat at the advisory group when they are available to attend, but we haven't made that formal connection between the reference group and the advisory group.
Would that be possible, or is that outside the scope of how this operates?
They're slightly different in how they're constructed. So the advisory group has membership from organisations, so most people are there in a paid role, and so the meetings occur during the day. So there might be some logistical challenges with having our volunteers from the Pacifica Reference Group attend, but certainly that conversation could be had.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both. Just a question around the communication outputs that are associated with the program and what kind of reach they're getting. I see there is a mention of a video, but could you just give us a general sense of kind of what communication outputs are associated with the program and what kind of reach they're achieving?
So the video that you mentioned, it was posted on Facebook, and I know that it received more than 2,000 views, but it's also posted on PNCC website as well.
Are there other communication outputs as well, or is that kind of the main thing?
So there's often multiple things during that Welcoming Week campaign specifically, but then during the rest of the year we work very closely with the comms team. So you may have seen a couple of stories that have come through about previous newcomers to the city. We also work on days such as World Refugee Day and Race Relations Day to make sure that we've got messaging going out throughout the year.
Mm. Thanks. And on the reach side of that, is that kind of relying on just kind of passive diffusion or whatever you want to call it, or is there more kind of pushing?
We do some paid promotion of key messages, particularly during that Welcoming Week campaign.
Right. And I guess ultimately I'm interested if you think we're making sufficient use of kind of the comms potential around this great program in and beyond this community.
Council covers a broad range of services, and so there's only so many posts you can make in one day. We do get our moment during that Welcoming Week and those other kind of key dates throughout the year, so we're making sure we anchor it in those those moments. We do have some other plans around, non-social media, so possibly looking at a display or an exhibition about the work of welcoming communities later in the year. So, we're trying to be creative around that.
Great. Thank you both. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Steph, I just wondered if you wanted to comment on, as far as you're able, the response that the Welcoming Communities team was able to provide post the, unfortunate incident suffered by one of the Massey students recently, because I think that provides a good illustration of the power of having this kind of group, I suppose. It's not only the proactive stuff, but it's also the ability to react quite quickly. I don't know how much you're able to share, but I think that might be helpful for people.
Happy to share. It's one of, I guess, several examples over the last 5 years where the strength of the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group network has really been shown. So I think we were notified about the video at sort of 7 a.m. on last Monday morning, and by 11 a.m. we were on a Teams meeting with key partners involved. There was about 5 on the call to discuss how we were going to respond in the immediate term to wraparound support for the individuals involved, but also as a community, what were the key messages we wanted to put out there to kind of, I guess, combat some of the unsafety that might have been caused through that incident in the wider community, and also, what are some of the actions and activities that we could plan further down the track, for example, around Race Relations Day.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, that would seem to be the end of the questions, so thank you for your report. So I'll move that the committee receive the memorandum entitled Welcoming Communities Annual Update, presented to the Community Committee on the 15th of March 2023, and seconded by Councillor Hancock. And I'll open up for any comment. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steph and Samaya. And thank you, Steph, really for opening up this presentation, really, with just a moment of reflection on what happened in Christchurch on the 15th of March 4 years ago. I guess probably my comment really is just to perhaps just reiterate my line of questioning around whether the Welcoming in Schools Framework pilot has actually included boards of trustees. I think that to formally connect BOTs to the Welcoming Communities program, I think is would take it to a position where you've actually got some governance support of that program within schools. And of course that might in fact actually bring some more pressure to bear to make sure that it's embedded in schools. So that's really just my only comment, but thanks very much for the report. And very fitting that it's presented today. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the report and the work, the actually huge programme of work that it represents. I'm delighted to see this programme return to being fully staffed so that we can deliver against the potential of it. And I suppose my reflection in reading it is just that, how big this is from your inclusive leadership, communications, access, economic development, business, employment, civic engagement, culture, identity, and welcoming public spaces. It really does reach to touch all of the activities of council. It covers all of our strategic goals and speaks to the community that we want to be. It's an incredibly powerful piece of work when we lean fully into it. I suppose our challenge, the challenge I took from today's meeting, has been that we take it for granted that this is who we are, that this is the work that we do. But when we hear, as we did today from our Pacifica reference group, that those established members of our community don't see themselves in our public spaces, it really makes me realise that there's so much more work to do across all of who we are, not just our most recent community members. And so it becomes even more important that we lean into this work, and thank you for bringing that to us today.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just add my thanks as well. As a member of the advisory committee, I see the huge amount of work that goes into this programme, and we're seeing the benefits of it throughout the city. So, I'm also encouraged by the fact that some of the experience and learning that we've gathered here is able to be passed on to other parts of the country, and I think that's should be a feather in the cap really for the team that they're able to do that. That the advice and experience of our staff here is being passed on to teams in other parts of the country. So, well done. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly concur with what's been spoken by yourself and other members. What I would like to signal is that I've got a reasonable level of appetite for ensuring that there's a good amount of amplification of this incredibly valuable program in ways that are, genuinely authentic. I'm not talking about just turning it into spin. I'm talking about we've got a lot of really incredible people and experiences and opportunities in this community that are framed within this program, and it'd be really great to see that, as widely as possible disseminated, to both serve to influence people within this community, but also serve as a strong attractor of people to this community. So I think there's, great that we're 5 years in, great that we've got, a full team doing great work. Let's make sure that people know about it.
Yep, good comments. Okay, no further comments. We will go to vote then on the hands to receive the memorandum. All those in favour? Aye. Right. Carried unanimously. Sorry, it's getting late in the day. Right. We'll move on to item 13, which is on page 113, and that is the update on response to homelessness. Stephanie. It's the Stephanie show today.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's great. You're doing a great job.
So this memorandum provides an overview of findings of a study completed in 2022 to identify how a targeted and coordinated response to homelessness or housing insecurity could be supported in Palmerston North, and also details steps taken since to progress the study's recommendations, including the establishment of a specific response alliance or collective and an application made for central government funding. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And sorry, it's a long day. Steph, so the recommendations in the report, I was just a bit surprised that at where this starts with a broadening of the scope of the proposed approach. So the original scope was about a night shelter. And the broadening proposed due to the lack of documentation and evidence that the aspiration was a community-led solution informed by their voice. And I was surprised because this came through, from memory, annual budget discussions, which is the very essence of community voice. So I wondered if you could comment on why we accepted that proposal to broaden the report.
So just to confirm, you're referring to the attached report from...
Yes.
Yeah. So our take on the report that was, the final report that was provided by Te Tihi, was that it did meet the scope that we agreed with them, and that was in line with the scope that was presented in the March 2022 report to the Community Development Committee. I think possibly the framing in their report suggests that there was a moment of decision and change, but actually I'm pretty happy that what they did look at was what we asked them to look at.
Okay, thank you. I might come back to that in comment. Thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Sorry, thanks, Stephanie. And really appreciate the report and you bringing it back to the table for us, and because there's some of us that weren't here at March 22 right through that year when the report's coming. I was just looking at things around the next steps on 115.4, number 4, actions to progress the recommendations and ideas. At 4.1, do we know what those actions look like at this stage, or are they still to be worked out, do you think?
So the actions so far are detailed there in the report. So we've set up the Alliance Group. We've applied for a significant funding opportunity through HUD. And we're in conversation with some groups. Just flipped over the page. So you can see that detailed in the diagram. Sorry, it's a bit fuzzy on there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so that's really the extent of the development of the action so far, and I expect the ideas will be teased out more by the Alliance Group in the coming months as well.
And the Alliance Group you're referring to is the Palmerston North Housing and Security Response Collective?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Hey, Stephanie, how much funding was applied for and who applied for it?
So we, Council, applied on behalf of the partner organisations in that collective group. Off the top of my head, it was just under $1 million over the course of 3 years.
Wonderful. And was the application based on the recommendations in the report? To give us some context, fantastic. Hey, look, I'm not going to take up too much time. There's a strong theme to use the collective impact model in their reports, but I get a sense from the officer's notes that there's a preference to steer away from a collective impact and stay in the lane of housing first. Is that a fair assumption? Or will that still be looked at by the collective?
I think they're complementary approaches. So we'd use the collective impact model for the overall kaupapa, the groups working together in partnership, with Council being the backbone, having shared data, shared aspirations. So those are the sort of elements of collective impact. And then specifically for this housing insecurity response, housing first as an approach is one of the main work streams to explore.
And I think it's time for me to go home, so thanks, Stephanie.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to collate a couple of questions in my head here. Can we go to page 115, 4.4, where we were talking about having applied for funding? Could you clarify for my benefit, funding for what? Is that to progress the 4 key recommendations of the report?
Yep, so we've applied for funding for 4 work streams, so they are detailed at 4.6.
Okay, so the 4 key recommendations. Right, I'm reading through this report. If we go to pages, well, it's 127 to 130, each page has a $140,000 approximate funding estimate for project, or a number of them have the $140,000 estimate for project design. Is that 3 independent $140,000 estimates, or is that one estimate across the 3 key recommendations? So, okay, does it total 140 or does it total 300 and 420?
My read of it is that it's individual to the work stream or the recommendation.
So we've applied for funding for those work streams?
No, so since we received the Te Tihi report, we gathered key stakeholders to look at the recommendations, and then there was some other information that was provided as well. So if you see on the diagram, it was also the same time that we came out of the Social Wellbeing Forum, and there were also some other ideas through specific organisations such as New Vaka. So we came to the table with all of that information, and then we determined those 4 work streams, and they're not the only work streams that will be taken forward by the Alliance. They were just the priority work streams that met the funding criteria.
Okay, so we've applied for funding for those work streams, and that's separate to the ones here later on in the report. So what actions do we need to take if we wanted to progress the work streams further on in the report, given they're not covered in the funding that we've applied for? Do we need to take an action as a committee, or does it come back to us? What would you suggest we do if we wanted to progress those key recommendations from the report?
So recommendation 1 is underway already. So that's through the formation of the Alliance. So recommendation 2, so that's covered under, in the diagram, I guess, other quick wins that the Alliance Group will look at. So also covered through current work or future planned work. Recommendation 3, we're also progressing that through a conversation with a specific service provider, and at this stage we don't need any additional budget to progress that. We believe there's opportunity for external funding to be explored first, but if we need to, we will come back to this committee with an update.
All right.
Sorry, and recommendation 4. Again, that can be progressed through the current alliance as other quick wins.
All right, so there's nothing else you need us to do at this stage to progress those?
Correct.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair. Sorry.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Sorry to come back, and sorry, Stephanie, I thought I'd had that question clarified for me previously. My question previously was the funding that application that was made to MHUD to cover the amounts in the 4 recommendations inside the report, and I'm just hearing now that the answer to that question is no. It's to cover the planning that the reference group, the response group have put together in that diagram. Have I got that right, Stephanie?
Not so much the planning, but the work streams that are listed at 4.6. So that's what we have applied for funding for from HUD.
Right, so just to be clear, the application to MHUD is not to provide funding for the 4 recommendations inside the Te Tihi report.
They all will be progressed through the work streams that we've applied for funding from HUD.
Okay.
Just not in the same package, I guess.
Okay. One last question. Te Tihi's not actually in that reference group. Is there a reason for that?
They are, yes. Have I missed them off the list?
Oh, no, they're stated in the paper, but they've never been to a meeting and haven't been invited to one.
Stacey Serivatu has attended the
On behalf of
meetings
Te Tihi.
on behalf of Te Tihi.
Thank you for the correction.
Stephanie, just to clarify, just because I think there might be a bit of maybe confusion, would it be fair to say that since the report came in from Te Tihi, quite a lot of work has been done in getting this group of organisations together, progressing the thinking from the Te Tihi report into the steps that are outlined in 4.5 and 4.6? So is that a fair assessment of where we're at now, that the report from Te Tihi came in and that staff have taken some actions already, which is what we're seeing in your staff report, and that the direction recommended in the Te Tihi report is now encompassed in the work streams of the PNHIR collective?
That's correct, yeah. Because there was this funding opportunity and that was open across December and January, we really had to take the moment and accelerate our thinking. So we took the paper, we got a group together, and we put the application in. And so in that process, quite a few things developed beyond the report that we received from Te Tihi.
Yeah, I think it's maybe just been a bit tricky for us to fill in the gaps between, because we've got the 2 reports together, to fill in the gaps between the 1 report and the staff report that I guess has taken things further on in the time between the first report was received and today. Yeah, okay. I just had a question about staff resource for this, because listening to the groups this afternoon present, it seems there's, and I may be wrong on this, it seems there's been additional work for staff, I suppose, in coordinating the lead sector groups. And now we've got this initiative as well, which, on first look, looks as though it might be quite heavy in terms of staff time and effort. Have we got enough staff resource to cover all of this work that we've loaded you up with?
As it stands, yes. We have, I guess, allocated within one of our advisor roles a sort of a third of that advisor to take this work forward, which is sufficient at the moment. We did already have relationships and work in this space, but it wasn't the same type of coordination role. So at this stage, yes. But if the work was to escalate, or if one of the work streams didn't pan out the way that we've planned it at the moment, or if the funding doesn't come through, then that's a different conversation.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Naylor.
Apologies if this is in the report and I haven't read it, but when is the decision-making date for that funding?
June.
June. Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. That's great. So I'm happy to move that we receive the memorandum entitled. No, I'm not going to remove anything. Update on the response to homelessness presented to the Community Committee on the 15th of March 2023. Seconded Councillor Hancock, and I will open up for any comment. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Councillor Bowen, I think probably sort of questioned, I think, sort of the expansion of the scope of this report. My first read, I think I probably sort of had similar concerns, but then once I've kind of familiarised myself with the report, my takeouts really are that it needed to be pointed out that homelessness is actually broader than those that just sleep rough. The other point of importance is that noting that we have a higher than the national average rate of housing deprivation, which I think means that this is an important piece of work. My own experience in this is that the solutions to resolve housing deprivation are actually broader than the night shelter solutions, which were initially talked about through councillors. I fully support the collective impact approach because there are multiple stakeholders who can actually lean into the issues around housing deprivation. And I'm sure that the results will be mana-enhancing for those people who are the recipients of the support that this program might provide for us in the future. It's very key to the social wellbeing outcomes of our community, so I fully support and endorse this matter. So thank you very much for supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I agree with Councillor Hancock's points on this. I suppose my question comes out of a slight frustration that we're 2 years on nearly from the issue of overnight safe spaces being raised with us through public consultation, public voice. Which is not to say that all of the other things that have come out of this report are not hugely valuable. Of course they are. But overnight safe spaces seems to me to be the pointy end of where harm happens. And I'm just a little disappointed that the journey we've gone on has taken such a long time. That's not a huge surprise, this is council. But also that where we've ended up in looking for funding specifically doesn't include overnight safe spaces. And so we'll advance lots of our concerns, but not that particular one. And that is a disappointment to me in the context of a very good piece of work from staff. So to explain my questioning there. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess my comment is that sometimes when you start these pieces of work, you're not quite sure where you're going to end up. And that being open to doing things differently is probably quite an important aspect of successful community work. So I also think that staff have acted quickly and proactively in identifying a funding opportunity and putting together a group of organisations to help get in an application. And, you know, when I think on it, you know, we're quite often in a situation where we're looking around for external sources of funding for council or community projects, and to have staff identify an opportunity and act on it effectively while we're all on summer holiday, I think is commendable. And so I'm hopeful that, and I'm quite excited that we might get some funding to take I guess a wider approach to the issue of housing insecurity. So whilst you know, a sort of bricks and mortar solution is always quite satisfying, it may not be the most appropriate response here. So I'm open to looking at other ways of doing things and hopeful that we might get some good funding to enable a better approach to housing insecurity. So I'm happy with where we've ended up. It's not where I expected to be, but I'm open to the opportunity it might provide. Okay, so I think on that we will vote to receive the memorandum. So all those in favour? I don't know what you do. Sorry, can you raise your hands if you're voting in favour? Okay, thank you. Against? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. That's carried with one abstention. Maybe note that that was Councillor Fitzgerald. Great. Okay, we're nearly there, people. It is item 14, committee work schedule, on page 161. So I'll just check with the Chief Executive if there's any comment you would like to make about the work schedule. Okay, the Chief Executive is happy to take any questions. I will just signal that I have got an additional recommendation for an extra reporting back. So I don't know if we can put that up now. I'm happy to move this if Councillor Hancock is happy to second it. I'm happy to open for questions either to the Chief Executive or about this additional report that I've asked to put on the work schedule. Do you want to say something? Yes, I think we can, but we'll just take questions. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question as a newbie to this. Did requesting the report earlier to investigate applying for age-friendly funding, that coming back to us, does that then need to be added to our work schedule, or do we just, that'll happen naturally?
It will be added to the work schedule. We don't need to do it now. It should appear on the next work schedule, is my understanding. Yep. Any other questions? Councillor Naylor.
I'm just wondering if you could clarify the social housing budget that you're referring to.
Yes.
Is that the 1 million one that was put back into
Yes,
the annual budget?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, so this is just to ensure that the programme that we included in the draft annual budget, if that is confirmed in June, that there's a reporting back fairly early in the financial year about plans for how that can be delivered. Yes.
Can I ask another
Yeah.
question? Just that in the discussion 2 weeks ago, officers indicated that there would be some papers coming around some of the housing options and some of the land that's already been identified. So I guess I'm just wondering how this would fit in with that work that's already underway, whether it be included or whether it's completely separate.
They're separate pieces of work. So the plans for housing development in Summer Hayes, Huia Street and Inner City, Council has not made a decision as to whether or not that housing would include social housing. However, Council has at the moment got a budget in the draft annual budget around $1 million for planning and providing options for new social housing. So I'm trying to ensure that we get a report back on that fairly early in the financial year, so that we don't just get towards the end of the next financial year and not have a report back on how that social housing budget is proposed to be delivered.
Okay, is it all right if I can make a quick comment now?
I'll just check if anyone else has got any questions. Are there any further questions? Okay, so it has been moved and seconded. We haven't got that on the screen. Yeah. Okay, so we'll open up for comment then. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the recommendation, but the comment I really just wanted to make is that I think we do need to look at housing holistically and look at the opportunities that we have already in any of the housing decisions we make going forward. I realise those decisions haven't been made yet, but I'd like to think that the papers that are coming back for us to explore those opportunities that exist within our current plans, whether or not social housing might be a part of those, I'd like to think that that's a part of those conversations as well. But certainly I don't think that precludes this report from being relevant also.
Yes, I mean, I agree. I think if the council decision is that there be some social housing in either Summerhays or any of the other sites, then it may well be that the report back includes how social housing could be delivered in those sites. But since that decision hasn't been made yet, I can't really include it here. Okay, no further comment? Right, we might actually get finished by 5 o'clock, people. We will now vote to receive the work schedule. Is everyone happy to take both recommendations at the same time? You're not?
Sorry, Madam Chair. I had a question around the work schedule. So are we voting on this first and then going back to work schedule?
Oh, we're way past questions, Councillor. We've had comment now. Is it going to affect the way you vote? Okay, we'll move on then. Right, so all those who are in favour, please raise your hands. Against? Abstain? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. Right, that brings us to the end of the meeting. So I will just thank you all for your resilience, and we'll end with a karakia. Kia puta ki te whaia, ki te au marama, whakamoia, kia tina, homie, huie, taikie.